The Book of the Damned by Charles Fort. Part 7. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels, demons, and monsters and serpents. This is Brothers of the Serpent podcast, and we are coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty roads of an ancient seabed high atop the Everest Plateau. And I am back from the trip. It was a fantastic trip, a lot of fun out there in Tennessee with Randall and company. Brad was there, of course. Randall Company. Brad Company. Randall's brother Rowan, who I finally got to meet in person and get to know. He's really great. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. And shout out to all of you who are out there on the tour, hanging out. Snake Bros fans and new Snake Bros fans. If you're listening to the show from the tour, welcome. Thank you for checking out the show. I had a great time.
How's it going, everybody?
Yeah. What else should I say about that? I gave an Egypt presentation. That was fantastically fun.
It's too bad I wasn't there for that.
I know.
You guys missed all the best tidbits.
Right. They kept asking me, where's the guy that says all the cool stuff on the podcast? I'm like, well, he couldn't make it. So
The Watcher?
You're stuck with me. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And what else we got going on?
We are joined by the Watcher well, and we also have an in-studio guest.
Oh, yes. See, I'm completely forgetting all of
He's
my
right
host,
here.
My host duties. He's right there.
Long-time listener, many-time show doer, Archer GMA.
That's right.
All
Back
right.
again.
Yeah.
Welcome back, buddy.
Back in the studio.
Yep.
GMA of late night fame. Infamy.
That's right.
Late night.
Well, Snake
fame.
Bros late night.
Pulled myself up by my bootstraps.
That's right. That was the best part of any Snake Bros episode ever. An actual live physical demonstration of how difficult it is to pull oneself up by one's own bootstraps. Taking place in the Tangent Cube on air.
It's hard in gravity, folks. Watcher's got it made up there.
And we are also joined by the Watcher from deep beneath his secret space station in secret outer space. And I think he's been long out of the bag of chips. He's been doing a night shift, which is pretty much every shift in space.
That's right.
How's it going, Watcher?
Every shift in space is a night shift.
Yeah, every single shift. It goes. Good to be on another episode. The stars have aligned, so I'm free to be here, so to speak.
Yes.
Are you moving to a different part of space soon?
Yes, thank God.
Okay.
And then back home for a bit. The home sector of space.
Is that Lagrangian point 1 or 3?
Shh. Don't dox the Watcher, buddy.
Oh, it's X.
Floating in a chip bag, high above the world. All right, so we're going to get right down to brass tacks here, folks. We got some listener communications. We got a rock and roll update. We got a agricultural update. All the good stuff.
Yeah. You want to do rock and roll first?
Yeah, yes, of course. The old rock and roll
The
update.
old rock and roll update.
Do we have a jingle for that?
We don't.
Oh. Well, we will
Just
soon.
need that.
Yeah, that's
That's
right.
what we need.
Forgot
The
about
Bill
that.
and Tim.
So GMA is in town because yesterday we mastered the album. We didn't do it ourselves. We actually went. This was really cool. We hired Lursen Mastering out in LA. Very accomplished, high-end mastering company, and Gavin Lursen himself having won many Grammy awards for his mastering on lots of different things, you know, bands, music, and then also movie soundtracks, TV show soundtracks. He's got a huge portfolio, and he's actually mastered a couple of our projects in the past, and we love his work. So we hired him to do the record, and this time we actually got online on a Zoom conference with him, and so he had his camera in there pointed at him while he's sitting at his console, And then we connected on a different computer on the studio computer over at our buddy Smith Sonic Studios, Nick's studio there where we track the drums. We connected. I can't remember what it was called, but it's a little application that gives you
listen to. Called, yeah.
It gives you a high definition audio stream between two computers, so across the internet. So we were able to listen to everything that was happening in the mastering studio in Nick's control room with some really good studio monitors in that big room in high definition, 96K sampling rate, 24-bit audio while he was mastering it. And then, he'd work for a while and then pause it and turn around to the camera and be like, so what do okay, I'm pretty much ready. What do you guys think? We'd kind of have our discussion about each track, and it was just a really awesome experience. And it was just amazing to me that, I just had to marvel at the technological age that we're in, where we can do this kind of stuff remotely. I know there's a lot more amazing things that are happening in terms of technology in the world, but that just was, I don't know, it just hit me like, this is so freaking cool that we can basically be in the studio with the guy listening to that high quality audio while he's mastering it and getting the effects of the mastering in real time.
Yeah, through your own studio monitors.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
So instead of doing it remotely in the traditional sense where he would just master it and then send us what he did and then we'd have to listen to it and then write back or talk on the phone and say, well, we want to try to do this, we were able to make changes as it was happening. It was just great. So we were all over there. Archer came in from Austin, and it was really awesome. Then after it was all done, we came back here in the cube and listened to the whole thing all the way through, and it's just phenomenal. There's still the possibility that we will change one minor thing on one song on the mastering side.
Mm-hmm. But other than that, it's done.
Yeah, it's like one or two things, but it's like these are going to be things where he could just basically like, oh yeah, turn the bass up a little bit. It's like,
okay, yeah.
But it was just so cool, and he's of course jumping back and forth between songs, so that he can reference like he's trying to sort of homogenize the sound across the entire record. He's not just working on one song exclusively and then moving on to the next one. He's
And did you notice that when he started, he went through bits and pieces of every song through the album?
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
And before even listening to one song,
right.
He just sampled 30 seconds from each song.
Oh, wow.
And got an idea of what the levels were for each song.
Got them all kind of in range. Yeah, and then he was kind of setting up his EQ. And the other really awesome thing was he was just very complimentary of the quality of our mix. So it was just, that was awesome. Like at the end of it, he told us, he was just like, he was like, I'm in here all day listening to this in the studio and it was just great. Like my ears didn't get tired. It was just warm. It was, it was really great.
Nice.
So yeah, he gave us serious props, and coming from him, that was really awesome to hear. So we're real proud of the project, and it's gonna be done pretty soon.
So what's the plans for release?
We are meeting tomorrow. The band is getting together tomorrow, and also on Sunday for 4 to 6 hours each day. We're going to be working on artwork and also planning the release. So I'm thinking solstice.
Okay.
So we still giving ourselves a few months to do some, just do some planning and promotional stuff. Plus we have to rehearse. We'd like to be able to play some shows.
We have to figure out where we're going to play.
We're going to record a live version?
Yeah. We're planning to do that at
All
Fowler's.
Right. Okay.
At Fowler's studio.
That'll take some practice.
That'll take some practice for sure, yeah.
So I don't know if we're going to be booking a show right at the time of release. We may do a digital release first.
And then are people going to be able to buy higher quality versions? They going to be what do you about?
I think everybody in the band is on board with this, but we are going to definitely have this discussion, but I think we're going to go the route of the podcast, like the same thing. So, we want to do the Patreon thing.
Yep.
And so, we talked about the possibility of having special content.
Yep.
So there's any number of things we could do. We could release the whole album in full for free.
Yep.
Or we could hold back the high resolution ones for, Patreon supporters. But then it's like, well, then everybody has like crappier versions of our music. So it's, I don't.
Yeah. Okay.
I was just thinking like.
Yeah, it's kind of a trade-off there.
You get the high res version. It's just free to download from
and then
the
you
website.
just do you just do like a pay what you want.
Yeah. And
Value
then
for
it's like,
value.
and then we do
value
like
for
special content would be like on the Patreon side would be like when we do rehearsals or practices, we'll record stuff, what we call the BPs, the band practice recordings.
That's it. We could stream it.
Yeah. And we can stream stuff. We can, but as far as special content, we can have all kinds of stuff. Like we're planning to do some real simple videos of just like some acoustic performances and other stuff like that we can put up for people who are supporters. And then also just asking people like, hey, any way you want to donate, same deal.
Yeah.
PayPal,
Absolutely. Yes.
Bitcoin,
Absolutely.
whatever. Because what we want to do is buy vinyl.
Yep.
We want to buy a chunk, some inventory of vinyl. And that's extremely expensive up front for us. So we might do pre-orders and all that kind of stuff. So we've got some planning to do, but it's really exciting. And the album just sounds freaking amazing right now.
All right.
That's great.
All right. Agriculture.
Well, been pruning up them vines. We've been pruning the vines. Vines are done being pruned. The final pruning has been completed, so they are ready for bud break, and
Even the hillside.
yeah,
All right.
it's all
Wow.
done. It's all done.
Wow. So I can get some help on the trees, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Russ has been pruning the peach trees. We still got a lot of work to do there.
Yep.
We did. I just did this white blend.
Oh man, it is.
It's a good white blend we put together from some other wineries and winemakers in the area in the hill country, and a little bit of our Viognier we threw in there. So we got that all bottled and it's sitting in the winery. I've been working on labels for that. We're putting together a rosé, same deal. And yeah, I mean, there is a lot going on right now. But bud break's coming, which means netting.
Yep.
We got to cover all the vines in nets to protect them from hail, the potential of hail and all that. So it's just
high.
It's a busy time at the vineyard. And how are the bees doing?
The bees are doing fantastic. I checked them all recently, like right when I got back from the trip. I had ordered a bunch of stuff and it had come in, so I added hive boxes, which are basically the full-size boxes, because I want the bees to be able to expand their operation.
Their brood.
Yes. So a hive box is a deep box, and the queen can get into it, so she'll plant eggs. They'll put in pollen. They'll put in all the stuff in the comb. The supers that go on top of that stuff, you put a queen excluder there, then you put a super on top of that, and the queen can't pass through the excluder, so only the normal bees can get up there, and that means they only put honey up there. So that's where you harvest.
Yeah.
I have 2 boxes now that have 2 hive boxes and a super on top.
And we have 4 active hives, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So we've probably been through 5 or 6 or 7 hives from the beginning, and they just would leave, or they would have like hive collapse, like they would just die.
Yeah.
So if anybody is out there thinking of starting beekeeping, you just got to stick with it, because that's what everybody told us. We kept having the hives die. And I was like, man, what are we doing wrong? Well, eventually one of the hives didn't die, and they didn't leave, and they didn't collapse, and they didn't fight and, swarm or anything.
Yeah.
And now it's their home.
That's right.
And then we got a couple more like that, and now we have a total of 4, and they seem to be healthy and sticking with us. So it's like, all right, wow.
That's right. And I also I've probably said this on the podcast before, but I got the greatest advice from the Amish guys that we bought the last nukes from.
Yeah.
I asked him, I was like, how do you we're getting these nukes from you. What do you recommend? And he just said, leave them alone as much as possible. They know more about beekeeping than you ever will.
Yeah.
And so like I tried to take on the, this like just
Sounds like a perfect job for you.
right. Just don't mess with
Minimalist role.
That's right. This is a great job.
So
I go look at them often. He also said you can walk up to a hive and watch its entrance to see what's happening. You'll be able to tell if it's being attacked or if something's wrong, just by standing there.
Hive observer.
Yes, I observe the
You're the
hive.
watcher.
Yes, I'm watching the hive, and I do so at least 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes more. I go out there and just stand there and watch and see, are they being attacked? And a couple of times I've seen them being like, in other words, yellow jackets landing and going inside.
Yeah.
And the bees fighting them off.
nom.
And you got to watch for stuff like that. But in general, I don't take their hives apart, which
We were doing that a lot.
yes,
more
and
at
that
the beginning.
upsets them,
Yeah.
right? And they'll think this isn't a secure place, and they'll leave. So I just generally try not to take the hive apart. And also, I was advised not to feed them during the spring and summer.
Yeah.
Like, feed them during the winter to help them out. But during the spring and summer, let them go out and work
forage,
for their food and forage, and
Get
they'll
strong.
make good stuff, and they get strong. The ones that are weak will die, and the strong ones will survive, and it makes the hive stronger. So we went from feeding them all the time to like
Keeping the weak ones alive, right?
yeah. Right. So anyway, they seem to be doing much better. All 4 of the hives are doing great, and I was able to, like I said, add hive bodies, and I'm planning to, the 2 that don't have supers on them, I'm going to be adding supers probably in the middle of the summer at some point to see if they'll, because I'd like to harvest some honey, because we harvested a little bit last year, and it was real.
Maybe next
Oh,
year.
man.
Maybe next year.
Yeah.
They got to expand.
Yeah. Just a little bit.
Maybe a little bit.
A little bit from each,
So on the you went from 1 to 4 boxes.
Get up on that mic, Ola.
Sorry, you went from 1 to 4 boxes, and did you use that one initial colony to colonize the other other 3 boxes, or you bought
from
colonies?
professional beekeepers. We
Okay.
purchased what they call nukes, which is like a nuclear hive. It's a little box with 5 slats in it.
Nukes for noobs.
Yeah.
with the queen.
It's got
and
the queen in there,
everything,
and she's got some babies. She's got some bees. But it's once you put it in a full hive box, it's basically
they expand out to fill.
yeah, that you want them to fill out. And a lot of times, when we were first doing this and we didn't know what we were doing and we're messing with them a lot, they wouldn't expand, they wouldn't fill
Yeah.
it out, and then they would leave. It's the first chance they got.
because they feel pressured.
Yeah.
and they're not comfortable.
Yeah,
or whatever,
exactly.
yeah.
Yep. And it's cool now. Like I've noticed too. I'll get through this quick, but like the more I do this, I feel like the faster they calm down. When you really have to peel the hive apart to do something, like I've had to, like when I was adding these hive bodies, sometimes I had to really like practically peel the thing in half to get to the pot, and then I would be moving
Internal
I'd be
core.
moving the feeder
Yeah.
up to the top hive body, so you really have to move stuff around. And when you first peel it off, they really get mad, and they come out fast, and they're all over the place. But the more I've done this, they'll come out and they get all over me, and then it's like it happens.
Like they know you
Yes,
by now.
it's cool. It happens instantly. All of them do it at once. Like and they swarm all over you. Then suddenly there's like a signal that goes through all of them. They're like, oh, it's that guy. And they just chill out and go
stop
back
buzzing.
in. Yeah.
It's the keeper.
Yeah. They're like, yeah, it's that guy.
It's the watcher. Yeah.
It's that creeper. The dude that's lurking around the entrance of the hive all the time.
Have you noticed any petroglyphs inside the thing? Like of some guy in a weird helmet?
Or a purse.
All right, let's tackle some space weather news.
Wait, one more question.
Oh, okay.
Do y'all think it's going to freeze one more time before Easter?
It very well could.
It could.
So I bought an awesome new weather system for the
With the wind vane and everything?
Well, it uses some kind of sonar or something. I can't remember what it is. It uses some other type of sensor, ultrasonic or something like that for wind. So there's no moving parts.
That's right. Yeah,
That's
tell me about
cool.
that.
Yeah.
Almost like a pedo tube from a plane or whatever, but
I don't know exactly how it works.
ultrasonic. Or
Yeah, it's
whatever,
ultrasonic. But anyway, this weather station's awesome. It's ambient weather. That's the name of the company. And they have an app, and I was able to, it just connects to the Wi-Fi and goes directly online. And then it has all these stats. And then you can set notifications. So I just set today a text notification once a day for any temperature drop below 34 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's awesome, dude.
Yeah,
because
that's
it's
cool.
like, oh shit, like if I get this
we
text,
gotta
it's
go.
like,
Yeah.
it's freezing, and if in certain conditions, we might want to go like force turn the fan on.
Yeah.
Just depending on where the buds are.
Yeah.
Because when you get bud break, like we have this giant vineyard fan, it's like 60 feet tall or something. How tall is it?
Yeah, something like that. 55, 60 feet.
And it has this giant prop up there that's slightly angled upward, and when it spins, it draws air from up high from the upward direction and blows it down, and then it slowly rotates around 360 degrees. It just keeps turning around and around and around. So it's like it's sucking the air from up high, which is warmer, and blowing the frost, the freezing air that settles down low to the ground, and even
Away from
it could be like the first 4 or 5 feet of air is the frozen air.
Yeah.
Those are the frozen temperatures. And then above that, it's warmer.
Yeah.
So it's just enough to just push that frost out of the vineyard. And it has a 300-foot radius that it can operate in.
And it sounds like a helicopter.
It sounds like a helicopter. And when it runs on a propane generator, a propane engine.
Yeah.
So it's got its own weather station and stuff. But sometimes if the wind is like, if there's little gusts that are like over 6 miles an hour every 5 minutes, it'll shut off. Because it's designed that way, because it's supposed to be very specific conditions, because of
It
an
wants
inversion
constant
layer.
flow.
It-
It doesn't
because
want
it's still
surging or whatever.
Yeah. So anyway, that can make the difference between a harvest or no harvest.
Yeah.
That fan turning on. So we also have a camera, and at night the fan turns on and there's this giant spotlight that shines up on the fan, so we can look at it in the middle of the night with the camera.
Yeah.
And see that it's actually
So
on.
if I get the notification, oh, it's dropping, the fan should be on at 34 degrees. So I can look in the camera and see if the fan is coming on or if we have a problem, like maybe it failed.
Yeah.
So that's
And you
really
gotta
cool.
run over there.
We're getting serious, man.
Yeah.
One harvest is, like last year was 10 tons. That's 2,000 gallons of wine.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yep.
So,
Space Weather News?
yes, please. Oh, that's
I'm
my
just
job.
Waiting for my old, there it is. Space Weather News from spaceweather.com. Solar tsunami and CME update. Sunspot AR2974 exploded this morning, and it produced an M1 class solar flare. This explosion also sent a shadowy shockwave rippling through the sun's atmosphere. This is called a solar tsunami. Newly arriving data from SOHO confirms that the explosion did hurl a CME toward Earth. NOAA forecasters anticipate G1 class geomagnetic storms when it arrives on March 27th, so stay tuned for updates. And the thermosphere is heating up, people. Solar cycle 25 is intensifying and Earth's upper atmosphere is responding. The Thermosphere Climate Index, or the TCI, is going up rapidly right now, reports Linda Hunt of Science Systems and Applications Incorporated. It has nearly tripled in the last year, she says. TCI is a number published daily by NASA, which tells us how hot Earth's upper atmosphere is. The thermosphere, our atmosphere's highest layer, literally touches space and is sort of a first responder to solar activity. Hunt created this plot showing how TCI has unfolded during the last 7 solar cycles. Solar cycle 25 is just getting started, and there's a graph here, which you can all see if you go to spaceweather.com. So Hunt says, so far, solar cycle 25 is well ahead of the pace of solar cycle 24.
Oh.
If this trend continues, the thermosphere could soon hit a 20-year high in temperature. So before we go any further, a word of caution. This does not mean Earth is about to heat up. The thermosphere is hundreds of kilometers above our heads. Here on the surface, we do not feel its heat. Summer days are no warmer when TCI is hot. As Dr. Marty something of NASA notes, energy driving the climate system near Earth's surface is hundreds of thousands of times greater than the thermosphere. As far as we know, cyclical warming and cooling of the thermosphere by the solar cycle does not affect climate. So that is the Space Weather News stories. Yeah. The sun doesn't affect climate,
Okay.
guys. You totally aware of that? Okay. Solar current conditions, solar wind speed is 395 kilometers per second. The density is 4.8 protons per cubic centimeter. The current sunspot number is 44. Let's see. The neutron count is 8% above the space age average. And the KP index is 1, which is very quiet. The 24-hour max was 3, which is still in the quiet range, but I guess according to this CME, it's going to go up soon. So there you go. That is your space weather news for the week.
Right on.
And we got crypto. We got crypto here. Bitcoin, $44,415.73. And Ethereum is at $3,112.04. That's a crypto update. All right. Anything else? You got stories? I got emails.
Nope. Let's do the emails. I've been too busy for stories.
Okay.
Actually, I've just been doing nothing but listening to the Wheel of Time on audiobooks. I've just been taking a vacation from real world stuff.
All right. Well, I got.
But I am pretty strong in the one power.
All right.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Working on the true power now.
Okay, this is a comment on episode 234, Book of the Damned, Part 6. This is from Anne. So I think what she's talking about here, remember we were wondering why he said below. Like he was like, they found something 7 miles below a mill, 6 feet underground. And we were like...
Yeah, is that south or...
Yeah. So Anne says... The Tweed is a river, so I think below here means downstream, not a map direction. And that makes sense.
Yeah, okay.
So, because, upper and lower Egypt.
So obvious now that you say that, Anne.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Okay, we have another comment on episode 234 from part 6. This is from Matt. This was a comment on the website. Says, I have a story exactly like Anne's. I was reminded of it during the last episode, but didn't think to email it in. When I was a kid, we belonged to a hunting camp in rural Pennsylvania. As a family, we'd spend weekends there to camp in lieu of going to a campground. At night, my dad would take us in his pickup truck and we'd shine the spotlight into the fields to find deer. Might be illegal. On this particular night, we were headed back to the cabin along a dark stretch of 2-lane paved road where you could feel the bumps and hear the crunching sound. My dad slowed the truck to a stop and remarked how there were toads everywhere. My sister and I jumped out of the back and emptied a box that was in the bed and started to pick them up and fill the box so we could take some of them back to the cabin and play with them. I am calling them toads instead of frogs because I remember them having bumpy skin like toads have. They were all adult-sized toads. There were easily hundreds of them from what we could see just in our headlights. I've seen turtle migrations where you encounter a bunch of them trying to cross a road in some areas, but I never have I seen the density of this one animal ever in nature in one spot. And they didn't seem to be traveling, they were just sitting there. Though we were around state game lands, this wasn't a spot where you'd expect to see toads. There was a stream nearby, but it was still a couple hundred yards away. The other side of the road was the steep forested slope of the mountain ridge in that area. My memory on this next part is fuzzy, but I think there might have been a brief rain shower that had just passed through. The reason for that, I think, is because we reasoned that the rain must have brought them out, like how earthworms can be seen after a storm. The next day, they were all gone, including the ones we had picked up, though I'm sure they just jumped out of the box. Didn't vanish into thin air, but you never know. I've done a lot of outdoor activities with the Boy Scouts in my youth, and never have I seen or heard or learned of something that would indicate that this is a normal occurrence. I wonder if we had driven that stretch of road just a few minutes earlier, we would have seen them falling out of the sky.
That's cool.
That's great. Thanks, Matt. And okay, this is from Eric. It's called Mjolnir. It says, Super Snako Bros. Listening to your Book of the Damned episodes, particularly the talk of thunderstones, and my mind wandered to Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. Here was a worked object, similar in shape to an axe head, but interpreted as a hammer that represented lightning in Norse mythology. Is it possible that Mjolnir was an actual object that fell from the sky and was worshipped by the Proto-Norse as an instrument of the gods? Many linguists believe the actual word Mjolnir has its origin from an old Slavic word for lightning, or that they both share a common origin. It's just a thought. That's it. That's all I got. Good night, from Eric.
That is a great connection right
Yeah.
there. Hell yeah.
The old hammer of lightning. Okay, this is we got lots of Fortean stuff here. This is from Joe the Dad. He says, it's called An African Dust Storm Blankets the Alps and an Interesting Reptile Rain Event. Snake Bros, I was pleased to hear that my space fish bergs from Tiamat theory has some standing.
Space fish bergs. Yes.
As you mentioned it during the Book of the Damned report. I had been kicking around emailing about an interesting rain/reptile event I had driving home late one evening on a Vermont country road. Then I saw this, and he provides a link. It's a link to an article called African Dust Go Over Europe at Ski Resorts. He says, this article was on a skiing culture website, and I had to send it your way. The website brushes the strangeness off easily. Quote, this type of event is not new and was already observed last year, unquote. Yep, the old happened last year, so don't bother looking more closely into this season's orange dust blanketing of the slopes that no one has video of occurring or satellite images of the dust trail or reports from the Mediterranean of it blowing over. Explanation. So here's the Vermont country road story. When I was in my late teens, I was speeding home to make curfew, as teenage boys do. I lived 5 miles up a dirt road that followed a 20-foot brook into the hills. On this night, a steady rain had just subsided. The road was wet, but not muddy. At first, the road started to look bumpy. Then it came into focus that there were hundreds of large earthworms on the surface of the road. The density of the worms was so great that I slowed down, risking missing curfew, and I came to a stop. I got out of the car and knelt in the headlights to take in the scene. I estimate that there were 30 to 40 worms per square yard. They were 6-ish inches long. I did not note it at the time, but they may have all been the same size. They were not overlapping each other, and they all laid flat on the ground. As I observed this wonder, my vision glanced up, and a large green frog was sitting 3 feet from my face and looking directly at me. It startled me, and I felt a presence from the frog. I looked around, and there were similar-sized 3 to 4 inch frogs all over the road as well. Worms and frogs together. I think Kyle's idea of the ground being saturated and animals coming above ground to avoid drowning is the answer. Still, it was ominous and cool. Snake-a-doodle-doo from Joe, the dad.
That's great.
I love these stories.
I do remember growing up in Georgia, when it would rain, I would always go out and the earthworms and stuff would all come out on the above the ground. Sometimes there would just be tons of them.
Yeah,
you know?
I remember that too. Here's another one called Fortean Phenomenon. This is from...
But I have to admit, I always came out after the rain.
Right.
And saw them.
So they could have fallen with the rain.
I can't say that I never watched them come out.
That's right.
Of the
Did
ground.
you ever see them emerge from the ground?
Were they ever in the gutters?
They were on the paved road. That's the thing. There would
So
be
they're not emerging
earthworms
from the
all
ground.
over the paved worms,
Yeah.
the road. So they weren't coming. They were like getting out of the
And
dirt
just going over
and
everything.
just getting on the pavement.
But yeah, asking if they're on the roofs and in the gutters is a great question.
Are they in the gutters?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, if you see them coming out of the drain from the gutter,
Yeah,
you know
then
something
you
weird is
know.
happening.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
Okay, this is from Jacobra. Says, hello, snakes. In regards to Book of the Damned Part 5, I may have experienced a Fortean phenomenon. I was living near Timmins, Ontario, Canada at the time. There was an average rainstorm in the springtime, nothing out of the ordinary, but when I went outside, every square inch of my lawn was covered in large earthworms. I couldn't walk on the lawn without stepping on worms, but I did anyways, and went around the back of the house to see if the backyard was the same, and it was! I know worms come up in rainstorms, as I used to hunt for them with my dad for fishing bait during rain at night. But I had never seen this abundance. There must have been 100,000 worms on my lawn. With my dad, we might catch 20 of them on a good night, but these I could have scooped up by the shovelful. I never thought that they may have come from the sky. The lawn is actually sandy soil and has ants most of the time, and I've never seen more than a few worms during rain before that day or after. Also, the thunderstones. My brother works in an open pit coal mine. He works large dozers, graders, and loaders to make roads for equipment in the mine. He finds these round, polished, black stones all the time. He took one home to show us. They are black like obsidian, and they weigh a ton. This one was about the size of my head, but weighed twice as much as a bowling ball. He says inside there is probably a fossilized bug, and over time they collect material from the coal under the pressure of the mountain. This was kind of small, but he said he has pushed boulder-sized ones with his machines. Inside could be fossilized anything. Dinosaurs, maybe? Anyway, he called it a thunderstone and said the name comes from the native Canadians who call them that.
Wow.
That's all for now. Keep up the good work, guys. Best podcast ever. Also, I can't wait for that $50 Dynasty album. J Cobra out.
It's coming, buddy.
Snacks!
Dude, Watcher, I watched this video a long time ago. This guy would take this machine that he made out in the woods, and it like vibrated the ground.
Makes the worms come out.
And it simulates what they think is like rainfall or a heavy rainfall. And they just start coming out of the ground like it.
So maybe that's what it is. It's like a specific beat of rainfall makes them really come out.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I just remember that. Yeah. I don't remember exactly what the scenario was, but I mean, like, it was amazing. The video, seeing these gigantic worms just like just coming out.
All right.
I don't remember why they were collecting them though, but
this is a short one from Gabe. It's called Serpents. He says, "Hey, brothers, I've made sure to get all caught up on the sods to join the Discord and finally email you guys. Once I discovered you guys, I watched all of them in about 3 to 4 months, so I'm chock full of 99.8% ignorance. Thank you. In all seriousness, I've had an experience with a UFO that I initiated, and from then on, I've just gone down the rabbit hole even further somehow. That same time, I had some type of transcendent/universal experience that I'm still unfolding for myself. I'd love to talk to you guys about it. I'm about to graduate college with a BS in geology, so don't even get me started with giant rocks. I love everything ancient and therefore love you guys. Thank you for everything you do. You do more than you think. Snake out from Gabe." And
Awesome,
yeah, I did see Gabe join the Discord last week. Now we're going over. Yeah. Well, I got one more here.
all right. Thank you, buddy.
I have to read this one.
Okay,
I can't possibly skip this one.
Can't not read it.
Because it's from Chuck.
Oh.
Yeah. It's called Raining Fish from Chuck. It says, "Greeting, bros and my fellow snakes. I'm very pleased to be able to share this, as I am a first-hand witness to fish raining from the sky.
What?
I grew up in northwestern Pennsylvania, not too far from the shores of Lake Erie. It was not uncommon for us to have the occasional tornado or to see waterspouts. The elementary school that I attended is still around. It's called Elk Valley Elementary School, and it is in Lake City, PA. If anyone is from that part of the country, they'll agree that they get some wicked storms. In the fall of 1971, we were waiting to go out for recess because recess was delayed due to a violent thunderstorm. Typical of strong storms, after it blew through, the sky cleared. So we were allowed to go out to recess, even though it had just rained heavily and the ground was still wet. Mud puddles were everywhere, especially under the swing sets. My friends and I ran out to the swing sets to get the best spots first, and on the way out, we noticed that there were fish on the ground. We had never seen that before, and we started poking at them. The fish were small, larger than minnows, but smaller than your hand. It is a common fish in Lake Erie, and we call them shiners. The best part about finding the fish was that many of the fish that landed in the puddles were still alive. They were swimming around as best they could. At that point, we decided that fooling around the fish was much better than our original plans, and consequently started throwing them at each other and the other things that kids do. When this became evident to the teachers watching over us, they called us inside quickly. So much for fun. We tried to keep a few of those fish, but we got caught. This is something that I vividly remember. It wasn't like there was just a few fish. There was an abundance of them, and what was remarkable is that they were still alive for the most part. Later on, we were of course told that there had been a waterspout over the lake, which is very close, and it picked up the fish and dumped them on our playground. This same school was nearly destroyed by a tornado in 1976. My sister's books were found 20 miles away, still intact. What? I guess it's just in one of those spots. Thanks for letting me share this, and I am thoroughly enjoying your reading of Charles Fort. It's fantastic. You and that guy that makes those comments. Thanks again from Chuck. Oanes.
Chuck? Turn out your pockets. He's got fish in his pockets.
Yeah.
Trying to hide them.
Trying to hide those fish.
Hey, I got a homo correctus you there.
Oh, yeah. What did I do?
Up that far north, it's pronounced wicked stam.
That's right. It's a wicked
They get
stam.
some wicked
It's a wicked stam.
Yeah, okay. Valid homo correctus. Okay. All right, that's all of the emails.
Well, you got one more.
Yeah, all of the emails, but we do have a birthday shout out we're going to do. So Rebecca sent in that her husband is turning 40 on March 27th.
Dirty 40.
And he is a fan of the podcast. So she says, Happy 40th birthday, Yoni. Although we couldn't make it to Egypt this birthday, your wife, Rebecca, promises to get you there to discover the ancient wonders that inspire you so much. In the meantime, keep listening to the Brothers of the Serpent podcast. Your family loves you so much. So, happy birthday, Yoni. We crack a beer.
So sweet.
Yeah, it is very nice. I'm going to crack some beers. in honor.
Youngster.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Hadn't turned 40 yet.
That's right. Cheers, fellas. And Yoni, happy birthday, buddy.
Happy birthday, Yoni.
Yeah. Fantastic. Oh, shit.
Oh, yeah, when you do that, it flows over.
Well, you got to slam it down after your birthday. Man. All right, we'll take a break. And we'll come back and tackle some more Book of the Damned.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen, Brothers of the Serpent podcast. And we got GMA in the studio, the Watchers in the space station. It's Friday night. We're drinking some beers. It's Yoni's birthday.
And we're grunting all them snakes out.
That's right. So, yeah, the Watcher reports that it is called grunting, which is you use, there's a number of ways to do this, but one is to basically make a vibration in the ground that the worms interpret as a heavy rain. I think that's what they say. And, yeah, some of these, flat billies out there in the swamp, they get out in the mud and freaking grunt up some worms. And it's
Flat billies.
it's an art. So check it out. Grunting, worm grunting. So it's the point is they will come out of the ground in certain conditions, right? It may not be that they just all come out of the ground just because of any rainstorm. It might just be the specific vibration that lets them know, like, oh, we might drown.
Right.
Like, let's get to high ground. So,
Well, I wonder if there's like some earth resonances that could
I was just
cause
thinking that.
to happen also.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Like, you got a minor rainstorm, but if there's like a little bit of
A
something,
little tremor or something.
They all
It's
come
just the
out.
right frequency.
Yeah, exactly. So we're still tackling the Book of the Damned by Charles Fort. Just to remind everybody, I'm not reading everything by any means. I'm skipping lots of stuff. So if you want to read the whole thing, you can check the show notes for links to either buy a digital or physical copy or get yourself the Audible version from our friends over at Grimerica.
Adult Brain.
Yes, right. Adultbrain.ca.
.ca.
Adult Brain Publishing.
Oh, man.
So we're on chapter 13. Fort says, one of the most extraordinary of phenomena, or alleged phenomena of psychic research, or alleged research, if in quasi-existence there never has been real research, but only approximations to research that merge away or that are continuous with prejudice and convenience, there is stone throwing. And it is attributed to poltergeists. These are mischievous spirits. So I've recently gone back and listened to all of the Book of the Damned episodes. So some things became clear to me that maybe we should tackle quickly. When he says acceptance, he says this a lot. He says, it is our acceptance that this or that is taking place or that this or that is happening. He means that as opposed to belief. He states in the beginning that instead of believing something, he just says, this is what I accept at this point. Okay? But it sounds confusing if you don't know exactly what he's talking about. And then the whole quasi-existence, that's his intermediatist thing that he does.
But it's more of like an acceptance based on the data that I've found. And
yes, he's saying it is our acceptance that this is what's taking place.
It's not based on belief.
Yeah, it's not a belief. So he says instances of stones that have been thrown or that have fallen upon a small area from an unseen and undetectable source. London Times, April 27th, 1872. From 4 o'clock Thursday afternoon until 11:30 Thursday night, the houses 56 and 58 Reverdy Road in Bermondsey were assailed with stones and other missiles coming from an unseen quarter. 2 children were injured. Every window was broken, and several articles of furniture were destroyed. Although there was a strong body of policemen scattered throughout the neighborhood, they could not trace the direction whence the stones were being thrown. London Times, September 16th, 1841. That, in the home of Mrs. Charton at Sutton Courthouse, Sutton Lane, windows had been broken by some unseen agent. Every attempt to detect the perpetrator failed. The mansion was detached and surrounded by high walls. No other building is near it. The police were called. 2 constables, assisted by members of the household, guarded the house. But the windows continued to be broken both in front and behind the house. So the Super Sargasso Sea and the beaches of its floating islands from which I think, or at least accept, pebbles have fallen. Wolverhampton, England, June 1860, a violent storm. A fall of so many little black pebbles that they were cleared away by shoveling. And a great number of small black stones that fell in Birmingham, in England, August 1858. A violent storm, said to be similar to some basalt a few leagues from Birmingham. And pebbles described as common water-worn pebbles that fell at Palestine in Texas, July 6, 1888. Quote, of a formation not found near Palestine, Texas. And round, smooth pebbles at Kandahar in 1834. And on all of these accounts, he's listing the sources. You know, the report of the British Association, the monthly weather review. There's also a quote, a number of stones of peculiar formation and shapes, unknown in this neighborhood, fell in a tornado at Hillsborough in Illinois, May 18th, 1883.
I wonder if, and maybe we talked about this possibility before, but that dust could be charged and wet and just cause, like, maybe has the right constituents to form like a concrete up in the sky.
Yeah.
So that it just starts to stick together due to moisture and charge and everything, and then just like solidifies on its way down.
And it's basically in a blender, right? Yeah. So you have these big chunks that are going to clump up with smaller chunks.
Yeah, so like hail does, right? Yeah. That could be some of this. Some of this was said it was like basalt that is found near Birmingham, but not in it, you know, or Wolverhampton. I can't remember which one that was, but yeah. So in that sense, they're saying like it was picked up from somewhere and brought and then dropped. But still, yes, could they form in the sky? Pebbles from aerial beaches and terrestrial pebbles as products of whirlwinds. Terrestrial pebbles as products of whirlwinds so merge in these instances that, though it's interesting to hear of things of peculiar shape that have fallen from the sky, it seems best to pay little attention here and to find phenomena of the Super Sargasso Sea remote from the merger. To this requirement, we have 3 adaptations. Pebbles that fell where no whirlwind to which to attribute them could be learned of. Pebbles which fell in hail so large that incredibly could that hail have been formed in this atmosphere. And pebbles which fell and were long afterward followed by more pebbles as if from some aerial stationary source in the same place.
This is the marksmanship thing again.
Yeah, that's right.
Pebbles fall in one small town, and then a few days later, they fall in the same small town again.
That's right. On the same blocks in that small town.
That's weird.
Professor Fassig gives an account of a fall of hail that occurred in Maryland, June 22nd, 1915. Hailstones the size of baseballs were not at all uncommon during this storm. An interesting but unconfirmed account stated that small pebbles were found at the center of some of the larger hail gathered at Annapolis. So there you go. It's the pebble.
The stone could be the nucleation.
Is the nucleation site. The young man who related the story offered to produce the pebbles, but has not done so. That's the quote from the account. And then later, Fort says there's a footnote. Quote, since writing this, the author states that he has received some of the pebbles, unquote. So when a young man produces pebbles, that's as convincing as anything else I've ever heard of, though no more convincing than if, having told of ham sandwiches falling from the sky, he should produce some ham sandwiches.
Let me just hand you a few pocket pebbles here.
That's right. Clearly, this guy's trying to save us from the dark forest. Got some sandwiches.
Sandwiches.
With cheese?
Maybe it was an alien race that was like, well, let's send them some sandwiches.
We now have a commonplace datum that is familiar in two respects. Little symmetric objects of metal that fell at Orenburg in Russia, September of 1824. This is in the Philosophical Magazine, Volume 4. And a second fall of these objects at Orenburg, Russia, January 25th of 1825. When I first came upon these data, I was impressed only with recurrence because the objects of Orenburg were described as crystals of pyrites or sulfate of iron. I had no notion of metallic objects that might have been shaped or molded by means other than crystallization until I came to Arago's account of these occurrences. And he lists the journal here, which I can't pronounce, volume 11. And here the analysis gives 70% red oxide of iron and sulfur and loss by ignition 5%. It seems to me acceptable that iron with considerably less than 5% sulfur in it is not iron pyrites. Then little rusty iron objects shaped by some other means have fallen 4 months apart in the same place in Russia. M. Arago expresses astonishment at this phenomenon of recurrence that is so familiar to us.
What was the size range on those? Did he say?
Let's see.
Little.
Yeah. Little symmetric objects of metal. That's how they're described. From Philosophical Magazine.
Dang it, Fort quantified little.
Yeah. The first account.
Well, that's from the magazine.
Yeah. The first account is listing the one in September of 1824. That one's from the Philosophical Magazine. And then the second account he gets from the Quarterly Journal of the Royal Institute. So the two accounts aren't even in the same journal.
Yeah.
The second one happened, I don't know, 6 months later, January 25th, 1825. So the next year.
But for the Royal Institute to say something about it,
right? They got
significant. Yeah.
So yes, M. Arago expresses astonishment at this phenomenon of recurrence. And yeah, I guess they were trying to say they were sulfate of iron, but he says if it's less than 5%,
that's
it's not
chemically
pyrites,
like a pyrite type thing.
Yeah.
That's mainly iron.
Right. It's basically a metal.
Iron with some impurities in it. Yeah.
Okay, skipping some here, and then we're going to the Monthly Weather Review from May 1884, a report from the Signal Service Observer at Bismarck in Dakota. 9 o'clock in the evening of May 22nd, 1884, sharp sounds were heard throughout the city, caused by a fall of flinty stones striking against windows. 15 hours later, another fall of these same flinty stones occurred at Bismarck. And there is no report of stones having fallen anywhere else.
Were any of those flinty stones worked?
That's a great question. This is a thing of the ultra-damned. All editors of scientific publications read the Monthly Weather Review and frequently copy from it. The noise made by the stones of Bismarck rattling against those windows may be in a language that aviators will someday interpret. But it was a noise entirely surrounded by silences. Of this ultra-damned thing, there is no mention findable by me in any other publication. So I like that he just points out there, many people and other scientific publications look at the Monthly Weather Review and get their own reports from it, and yet this was in that review, and then he could find... So he checks the other journals. Did they also report it to their readers?
Never picked it up.
No. the ultra-damned. The size of some hailstones has worried many meteorologists, but not textbook meteorologists. I know of no more serene occupation than that of writing textbooks. In the drowsy tranquility of a textbook, we easily and unintelligently read of dust particles around which icy rain forms, hailstones in their fall, then increasing by accretion. But in the meteorological journals, we often read of air spaces nucleating hailstones. But it's the size of the things. Dip a marble in icy water, dip and dip and dip it. And if you're a resolute dipper, you will, after a while, have an object the size of a baseball. But I think a thing could fall from the moon in that length of time. Also, the strata of them. The Maryland hailstones are unusual, but a dozen strata have often been counted. Farrell gives an instance of 13 strata. Such considerations led Professor Schwartz to argue that some hailstones are not and cannot be generated in this Earth's atmosphere, but they must come from somewhere else. Now, in a relative existence, nothing can of itself be either attractive or repulsive. Its effects are functions of its associations or implications. Many of our data have been taken from very conservative scientific sources. It was not until their discordant implications or irreconcilabilities with the system were perceived that excommunication was pronounced against them. So did you guys get... Okay, he's pointing out that when you cut a hailstone in half and you get lots and lots of layers, and somehow
it was dipped a whole bunch.
Yeah, a bunch of times, and this doesn't fit really, and especially when they're the size of baseballs and weigh a lot, that some meteorologists are like, look, this doesn't fit how we think these littler hailstones form. And you see all this strata. And then Fort is suggesting you try and experiment yourself. Take a marble, have it nice and cold, and have some cold water and keep dipping it to get layers on it. See how long it takes you to build it to the size of a baseball. It takes a long time. So
he's thinking that they come from outer space?
Yeah, and he's saying that somebody else also suggested it. Professor Schwartz, Schwedoff, and he argued that some hailstones are not and cannot be generated by this Earth's atmosphere. That they must come from somewhere else.
Seems plausible that, especially like ones that have stones inside them, that you could have. We know that we passed through. Yeah, that's
giant chunks of cometary dust.
But how long can that cometary dust have water ice on it
without sublimating? Is that what you're talking about? Yeah.
I mean, it's old comet tails.
Yeah,
start with a big enough snowball. It'll get down to the bottom before it melts all the way.
I guess. Professor Schwedoff's paper was read before the British Association. This is listed in the report of it. The report of the British Association from 1882. The implication and the repulsiveness of this implication to the snug and tight little exclusionists of 1882, though we hold out that they were functioning well and ably relative to 1882, that there is water, oceans or lakes and ponds or rivers of it, and that there is water away from and yet not far remote from this Earth's atmosphere and gravitation. This is the science of supergeography.
So would that be like they're saying that there's like a floating stream of ice?
Well, he's saying
out there that we occasionally run through.
So that's what Fort's saying.
Okay.
He's saying that the paper that this professor wrote about how, like in his estimation, these giant hailstones with all these layers, they don't fit formation of
normal hailstones.
Normal hailstone models. So he's implying maybe they come from space.
We sideswipe a big ice trail every once in a while.
That's right.
That we get big old ice balls.
Yeah, Fort's calling it a space river, but you guys, he's basically saying similar to what you were saying, like cometary tails would be a space river of water. It's just frozen,
What do they call it? The Arctic blast that came down?
Oh, the polar vortex.
The polar vortex. Yeah. That's a real polar vortex right there, coming straight from space.
That's right. I think that even more amusing is our own acceptance that, not very far above this Earth's surface, is a region that will be the subject of a whole new science, supergeography, with which we shall immortalize ourselves in the resentments of the schoolboys of the future. pebbles and fragments of meteors and things from Mars and Jupiter and Azuria, wedges, delayed messages, cannonballs, bricks, nails, coal and coke and charcoal and offensive old cargoes. Things that coat in ice in some regions and things that get into areas so warm that they putrefy, or that there are all the climates of geography in supergeography. I shall have to accept that floating in the sky of this earth there are often fields of ice as extensive as those in the Arctic Ocean, volumes of water in which are many fishes and frogs, and tracts of land covered with caterpillars. Did we start the timer?
Yeah.
Okay.
We got time.
Okay.
Yeah, good.
We now have many more of our expression upon hail as a concomitant, or more data of things that have fallen from the sky with hail. In general, this expression is: these things may have been raised from some other part of the earth's surface in whirlwinds, or may not have fallen, and may have been upon the ground in the first place, but were the hailstones found with them raised from some other part of the earth's surface, or were the hailstones upon the ground in the first place?
Yeah.
As I said before, this expression
They were.
What,
If
the
they're
hailstones?
true hailstones.
They were on the ground in the first place.
Yeah. As water.
Yeah. Yeah, they were picked up by processes and then turned into hailstones and then dropped. As I said before, this expression is meaningless as to a few instances. It is reasonable to think of some coincidence between the fall of hail and the fall of other things, but inasmuch as there have been a good many instances, we begin to suspect that this is not so much a book we're writing as a sanitarium for overworked coincidences. Cosmos, Volume 13, quotes a Virginia newspaper that fishes, said to have been catfishes, a foot long, some of them, had fallen in 1853 at Norfolk in Virginia with the hail. Catfishes.
Fishes.
Foot-long catfishes.
That would have hurt.
Not sticklebacks, just the catfish. Vegetable debris, not only nuclear, but frozen upon the surfaces of large hailstones at Toulouse in France, July 28, 1874. That's interesting. So the hailstones had vegetable debris frozen into them. Description of a storm at Pontiac in Canada, July 11th, 1864, in which it is said that it was not hailstones that fell, but pieces of ice from half an inch to over 2 inches in diameter. So this part of the book, it starts to change when he's making these distinctions between hail and then just chunks of ice.
Right, like ice cubes.
Yeah. Not layered.
Not layered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Marble dipped.
Right.
But
Actually
cracked
just
off pieces of the iceberg coming down.
Yes.
Basically.
Quote, but the most extraordinary thing is that a respectable farmer of undoubted veracity says he picked up a piece of hail or ice in the center of which was a small green frog, unquote.
That is weird.
Storm in Iowa, June 16th, 1882, in which fell hailstones and pieces of ice. This was reported in the Monthly Weather Review. Quote, the foreman of the Novelty Ironworks of this city states that in 2 large hailstones melted by him were found small living frogs, unquote. But the pieces of ice that fell upon this occasion had a peculiarity that indicates, though by as bizarre an indication as any we've had yet, that they had been for a long time motionless or floating somewhere. We'll take this up soon. June 30th, 1841, fishes, one of which was 10 inches long, fell in Boston. And then 8 days later, fishes and ice fell at Derby. In Tim's yearbook, 1842, it is said that at Derby the fishes had fallen in enormous numbers from half an inch to 2 inches long, and some considerably larger. In the Athenaeum, 1841, copied from the Sheffield Patriot, it is said that one of the fishes weighed 3 ounces. In several accounts, it is said that with the fishes fell many small frogs and pieces of half-melted ice. We are told that the frogs and the fishes had been raised from some other part of the Earth's surface in a whirlwind. There's no whirlwind specified. Nothing said as to what part of the Earth's surface comes ice in the month of July. This interests us that the ice is described as, quote, half melted, unquote. In the London Times, July 15th, 1841, it is said that the fishes were sticklebacks, that they had fallen with ice and small frogs, many of which had survived the fall. And we note that at Dunfermline, 3 months later, in October, fell many fishes, several inches in length, in a thunderstorm.
Did we already make stickleback jokes?
We should make more stickleback jokes.
I wasn't sure if we've done that.
Yes, you did.
Okay.
Yes, when I was going back and listening to the show, your stickleback song was really cracking me up. So, of course, I've been making up lyrics all day.
I was just trying to figure out what the graph was going to be.
No, it's just, look at this beef flake pile. Every time I do it makes me smile. Look at these falling fish. I bet they'll make a tasty dish. Because they always try to eat them.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
I was going to say, my terrible joke was going to be, but you moved on to the fish. But
sorry.
The experience of finding a frog inside, it was inside the ice.
Yeah.
It was a riveting experience.
Riveting.
So one thing it seems like, at least in a lot of these cases, is that whatever the medium that's falling, it seems to be that you don't see a lot of varying size.
Yeah.
Like you see a lot of one size or something, like even if it's different things like frogs and rocks. The frogs and rocks are about the same size.
Or same weight.
Or same weight or something like that, which is almost...
Same, yeah.
There's some kind of sorting.
Right, almost like a...
Same like air resistance.
They're all passing through the same screen.
Yeah, in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
They're being sifted by
right.
Mother Nature somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Which could be skirted by things like, okay, well, if you have like a water spout or something, there's going to be a certain weight that it can pick up, and it won't be able to pick up more than that.
Yeah, because too much wouldn't it cause resistance in the basically the wind, right? The water
air
resistance.
You have the weight of gravity itself pulling the object down. You know, floating a feather versus a bowling ball.
But I mean, to maintain the structure of the cyclone or whatever it is, the water spout itself.
It can't be too heavy.
Once it gets heavy, if it gets full of like dense particles that are causing all kinds of turbulence,
then it loses energy.
Then it loses the energy to the turbulence, and it can't sustain itself. So
it can't pick up really heavy objects.
Yeah, and I imagine I don't know, but I can see how. I was gonna say before he was like, "Where did the ice come from in June?"
Well, southern hemisphere.
I'm just saying there were chunks of like partly melted ice, not layered.
Yeah, it's ice.
Hailstones.
Yeah.
So a water spout going through
like
an area,
region.
Yeah, an area where the bank is frozen, and it picks up a bunch of
chunks of ice,
and then chunks of ice.
Yep.
But it's it's weird how like some of the critters are like, well, these are not wintertime critters. You know what I mean? You're not going to see some frogs out
unless they're burrowed in the ice for winter or whatever.
Or if they were just frozen in the ice.
Yeah. And then they just get... Now, one good question would be that frog that was found in the...
Yeah, was it dead?
Was it dead or was it just hibernating?
I know. That's what I want to know. Like, he uncovers it, it's frozen, and then it thaws out and
hops away. Yeah, that's even cooler right there. And then, did that frog come from space?
Right. Is that a space frog?
Is that a
So the Watcher is saying that, you're right, Watcher, Derby, D-E-R-B-Y. The English one is pronounced Darby.
Darby.
I thought they were talking about Boston, so I thought it was just Derby. But maybe you're right. Maybe he went from Boston over to Derby in England. But yeah, thank you for that. Where were we at? Okay, so yes, lumps of ice, a foot in circumference. In Derbyshire? Is it Derbyshire?
Chunk of ice.
In England, May 12, 1811. This was listed in the Annual Register, 1811. A cuboidal mass 6 inches in diameter that fell at Birmingham 26 days later. This was written by Thompson in Intro to Meteorology. The size of pumpkins in Bangalore in India. So here, I'm just going to go through it. There's a huge list of these. May 22nd. Masses of ice, 1.5 pounds each in New Hampshire, August 13th, 1851. Masses of ice the size of a man's head in the Delphos tornado. This is one from Popular Treatise. Large as a man's hand, killing thousands of sheep in Texas in May 1877. That was in Monthly Weather Review. Pieces of ice so large that they could not be grasped in one hand fell with a tornado in Colorado, June in 1877, also in Monthly Weather Review. Lumps of ice 4.5 inches long, Richmond, England, August 2nd, 1879, Simmons Meteorological Magazine. A mass of ice 21 inches in circumference that fell with hail in Iowa in June in 1881, Monthly Weather Review. Pieces of ice 8 inches long and 1.5 inches thick, Davenport, Iowa, August 30th, 1882, from Monthly Weather Review. Lumps of ice the size of a brick, weight 2 pounds, Chicago, July 12th, 1883, Monthly Weather Review. Lumps of ice that weighed 1.5 pounds each, India, May of 1888. Listed in Nature. Lumps of ice weighing 4 pounds fell in Texas, December 6, 1893.
Open up your coolers, put them outside.
Lumps of ice and 1 pound in weight, November 14th, 1901, in a tornado in Victoria, in Australia.
That's what we do in a hailstorm.
Open up those coolers.
Yeah, just put your coolers outside, open them up.
So I had a thought while you were talking about that, because the tornadoes, just another... So if you take air and you spin it fast enough, you're basically going to compress it, right?
Yeah.
So I wonder if there's something going on there where the air is moving so fast that it compresses and lowers in temperature.
Well, it would go up in temperature, right? With the compression.
If it was compressing... But once it
expands, right? So if it gets compressed, moves to a low pressure region and expands again, then you have that sudden change in temperature and
it could generate ice.
If it's compressing the air down low and then pulling that air up, compressed, it's cooling it off. Then when it decompresses up there,
you got a super cold region at the top.
Freaking cold.
Yeah. So then you've got this continuous ice region
so
right at the top.
It's a water spout too. It can have water in it, and maybe it can generate ice blocks.
I would think that in that case, you'd still see the marble-like.
Probably.
You wouldn't see chunks being formed or anything like that.
I have to say, formation. Like the hail that I've experienced is usually pretty light. Like it can fall and it can do damage, but it isn't heavy. It doesn't have the same weight as an ice cube, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't feel it's not as dense.
Yeah.
It's got like layers of air in between the layers.
Right. They're spongy.
It's not a solid crystal of ice. Yeah.
Like you could take a dropper of water and drop it on the hailstone and just absorb it.
Yeah.
It doesn't run off.
It's like porous because because it's more like you're not getting a solid.
It's slushy ice.
And it's like you're not getting a solid coating every time all over the uniform coating over the surface, right? So you're getting like little pores and pockets and like.
I don't know if I could be wrong, but I don't know if the description of dipping the cold marble is correct. I think it's the conglomeration of little chunks of.
Yeah, it's like vapor.
Yeah, it's little
can see
beads
that,
of water that are
clumping.
They're basically
together.
Frozen, but they're still liquid.
Yeah.
And then they hit
it's slushy ice.
They hit a nucleation site, something hard and edgy, and they freeze instantly onto it.
Yeah.
And so a bunch of them keep doing that. Once you got it building up, then
it just keeps clumping.
It just every droplet of water that's below freezing touches it and instantly freezes onto it.
But nevertheless, when they cut these things, you can see like layered strata. So it does imply that it happens in stages.
Well, yeah, and I wonder if that's part of like the cyclical up and down.
It goes up through the area where the water
colder region, warmer region, colder region. Yeah.
I'm just spitballing.
So it clumps.
I don't know how it's
well,
actually
and
done.
probably what it does is it
we
clumps.
need a meteorologist on the show, guys.
Yeah, we do.
Maybe we should research that.
I actually
I did.
might happen to know one.
Oh, really?
Get a meteorologist on here. Yeah. It's going to be like, it never rains frogs.
Never
Ever.
rains frogs.
He's not going to want to ruin his career by coming on the show. All right.
Just use alias.
Use an alias. All right.
We'll call him Mr. Meteor.
Mr.
He's a
Meteor.
meatloafologist. All right.
Are we taking a break?
Yes.
All right.
Snacks.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. Brothers of the Serpent podcast, second half of the show. Continuing with the Book of the Damned by Charles Fort, talking about hail and ice formation. And cracking some beers.
That was a good one.
Yeah. This episode featuring Stickleback songs. Lead singer is Pickle Rick.
That's right.
Okay, blocks of ice, Fort says, weighing 4.5 pounds, fell in Spain in June of 1829. There was a block of ice weighing 11 pounds in France, October 1844. And a mass of ice 3 feet long, 3 feet wide, and more than 2 feet thick that fell in a storm in Hungary in 1802. So what about that?
3 feet wide?
3 feet long, 3 feet wide, and 2 feet thick.
Wow.
Like, that's a piece of a frozen lake or something.
Yeah.
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 That's a big
Glacier.
chunk of ice.
According to the Salina Journal,
I just think it fell from space, man.
a mass of ice weighing about 80 pounds had fallen from the sky near Salina in Kansas, August 1882. We are told that Mr. W.J. Hagler, the North Santa Fe merchant, became a possessor of it and packed it in sawdust in his store. 80 pounds. Now, a tornado will pick up stuff that weighs a lot and throw it around. So, like, you can believe that wind can toss around an 80-pound thing, but is it forming up there?
Well, and I want to know what the surface looks like. Mm-hmm. Is it smooth, like it's been ablated,
right?
Or is it fractured, like fresh ice, or what does it look like?
Right. I mean, it seems like also it probably weighed a lot more than 80 pounds when it hit the ground. Yeah, because it would have shattered. And that's the biggest piece. But yeah, I think your point about the tornadoes is really good. Like
it'll throw tractors, like
I can't see this thing.
Throw an 18-wheeler, fully loaded, no problem.
Yeah,
I can't see this thing being formed in the atmosphere, but falling from space, like you can imagine, like some chunks in. Let's go back to the comet idea. Like you have chunks from a cometary tail that's very ancient, but maybe like there's a chunk of ice that's surrounded by stone and mud and dirty all this dirt.
So it's got a layer of protection, so it won't sublimate.
Yeah and then it collides with something, and then these pieces fall in, and so
this is before they even thought meteorites were a thing, so nobody was checking to see, could this be space ice?
Could this be from space? Yeah.
It would be interesting too, because it would have other dissolved gases in high abundances, like compared to normal atmospheric gases. So if you'd have taken a piece of the ice and sealed it in a jar or in a glass bottle, like crushed it up and put it in the glass bottle and sealed it, then when it melts, the volatiles would become gas and they would be pressurized in there, and you could tell. that it was not normal atmospheric conditions that it froze in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Upon the 16th of March, 1860, in a snowstorm in Upper Wasdale, blocks of ice so large that at a distance they looked like a flock of sheep had fallen from the sky. A mass of ice about a cubic yard in size had fallen in Kandaish in India, 1828.
Cubic yard.
Yeah. A cubic yard in size.
That's huge.
Yeah. I wonder if this is
How much would that weigh?
in the very beginning, well, it depends on how it was frozen, right?
Well, yeah, but just, take an average.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
Remember at the beginning of the book, he mentions the piece of ice that fell somewhere in India that was the size of an elephant. And then he's like, I shouldn't have said that yet. It's too soon for that one.
Shouldn't have brought it up.
London Times, August 4th, 1857. A block of ice described as pure ice, weighing 25 pounds, had been found in the meadow of Mr. Warner of Cricklewood. There had been a storm the day before. As in some of our other instances, no one had seen this object fall from the sky. It was found after the storm, and that's all that can be said about it.
It was 25 pounds when they found it.
Yeah, and it was described as pure ice, so that
Yeah,
implies crystalline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, by all accounts, would not form in the atmosphere.
And it was in August, so it's not being picked up from anywhere nearby. If it's
Not
being
in the
picked
northern
up.
hemisphere.
Right. Letter from Captain Blackiston, communicated to the Royal Society. January 14th, 1860, in a thunderstorm, pieces of ice had fallen upon Captain Blackiston's vessel, and it was not hail. Quote, it was not hail, but irregular shaped pieces of solid ice of different dimensions up to the size of half a brick, unquote. According to the advertiser Scotsman, quoted by the Edinburgh New Philosophical Magazine, an irregular-shaped mass of ice fell at Ord in Scotland in 1849 after, quote, an extraordinary peal of thunder, unquote. So he brings this up often. This happened with the thunderstones as well, and sometimes with the falls of fishes and frogs, that first there's an incredibly loud noise, and then this stuff falls out of the sky.
I could see that the thunder could be the cause of like a whole bunch of nucleation sites.
Could be,
Just 'cause
yeah.
of the vibration
You just got this huge sound wave moving through the air.
causing everything to
boom,
solidify.
boom, 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 boom,
Yeah.
fucking.
Yeah.
It is said that this was homogeneous ice, except in small part, which looked like congealed hailstones.
Archer's, I'm sorry. He just dropped the F-bomb and then made this face at me, and I was like, why did he make that face? And then I realized, oh.
Sorry.
I'm like looking up like, what's so funny? Okay. So yeah, this other piece of ice that fell after the thunder, they said it was homogeneous except in a small part which looked like it had congealed hailstones stuck to it.
So it's like a larger nodule with little nodules poking out of it.
And this mass of ice
was a ball of funk.
that fell in Scotland after the extraordinary peal of thunder with the congealed hailstones on it was 20 feet in circumference. The story, as told in the London Times, August 14th, 1849, is that upon the evening of the 13th of August, after a loud peal of thunder, a mass of ice said to have been 20 feet in circumference had fallen upon the estate of Mr. Moffat of Rossshire. It is said that this object fell alone without hailstones. Altogether, although it is not so strong for the Super Sargasso Sea, I think this is one of our best expressions upon external origins. That large blocks of ice could form in the moisture of this Earth's atmosphere is about as likely as that blocks of stone could form in a dust whirl.
Okay, fine. That was my theory.
He just destroyed your idea.
Yeah, what if it was concrete dust and there was water up there? Come on, guy.
Okay, yeah. It would be concrete, not stone.
So the Watcher says that 1 cubic yard of water, weight of water, is 1,674.38 pounds.
Well, but that's liquid water. Frozen
Yeah.
water has a different density.
Yeah, that's what Russ was saying when you asked how much that would weigh. It's
Well,
like,
yeah, I'm
it
saying
depends on-
like average it out for like an ice cube in your fridge or something, you know?
Yeah,
Not
give us a
liquid-
cubic
not
yard of
liquid.
water. Watcher, give us a cubic
Come
yard of
on,
standard
liquid
ice.
water. Come on.
It's close, though. Let's say it's 1,000 pounds.
1,000 pounds. Yeah, still half a ton
Yeah.
flying through the air.
Yeah.
Casually.
In the report of the British Association in 1855, it is said that at Porhandur in India, December 11th, 1854, flat pieces of ice, many of them weighing several pounds each, had fallen from the sky. They are described as large ice flakes. So he goes on to speculate here about, I'm not going to read it, but he talks about the Super Sargasso Sea again, and now he's thinking of ice fields. You know?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. 100 pounds, 1,549 pounds for ice.
Okay.
You guys are trying to say that water grows by half its own size when it freezes?
No, I was just making a, like, because I'm thinking of if it's forming,
Spongy,
yeah,
yeah.
Still 1,000
It's
pounds.
porous ice.
Yeah.
Even then, 1,500 for, your ice cube and your tray.
Yeah. That's,
If it's coming from space,
Yeah.
that's a lot of ice still.
Yep.
And it'll probably be less dense.
Yeah, so he's talking about ice fields in the sky. That these things remind him of, now he's thinking of like if the Super Sargasso Sea freezes in some section and then the ice breaks up and then something makes it fall, then you get these big flat things of ice. He says, from Simmons Meteorological Magazine, a correspondent writes that at Braemar, July 2nd, 1908, when the sky was clear overhead and the sun was shining, flat pieces of ice fell from somewhere. The sun was shining, but something was going on somewhere. Thunder was heard. Until I saw the reproduction of a photograph in the Scientific American, February 21st, in 1914, I had supposed that these ice fields must be, say, at least 10 or 20 miles away from this Earth, and invisible to terrestrial observers, except as the blurs that have so often been reported by astronomers and meteorologists. But the photograph published by the Scientific American is of an aggregation supposed to be clouds, presumably not very high. So clearly detailed are they. The writer says that they looked to him like, quote, a field of broken ice, unquote. And beneath this is a picture of a conventional field of ice, floating ordinarily in water. The resemblance between these two pictures is striking. Nevertheless, it seems to me incredible that the first of the photographs could be of an aerial ice field, or that gravitation could cease to act only a mile or so from this Earth's surface. Or that normally this Earth's gravitation extends, say, 10 or 15 miles outward, but that gravitation must be rhythmic. Of course, in the pseudo-formulas of astronomers, gravitation as a fixed quantity is essential. Except that gravitation is a variable force, and astronomers deflate with a perceptible hissing sound into the punctured condition of economists, biologists, meteorologists, and all the others of the humbler divinities who can admittedly offer only insecure approximations. We refer all who would not like to hear the hiss of escaping arrogance to Herbert Spencer's chapters upon the rhythm of all phenomena. Everything else, light from the stars, heat from the sun, the winds and the tides, forms and colors and sizes of animals, demands and supplies and prices, political opinions and chemic reactions and religious doctrines and magnetic intensities and the ticking of clocks, and the arrival and departure of the seasons, if everything else is variable, we accept that the notion of gravitation as fixed and formulable is only another attempted positivism, doomed like all other illusions of realness and quasi-existence. So it is intermediatism to accept that, though gravitation may approximate higher to invariability than do the winds, for instance, it must be somewhere between the absolutes of stability and instability. Here, then, we are not much impressed with the opposition of physicists and astronomers, fearing a little mournfully that their language is of expiring sibilations. So are you getting what he's saying there?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's saying basically that it is variable, all these things are variable. Like we talk about this often, that like these constants are actually variable, but they're so invariable compared to some of the most variable things like wind that we can use them to make approximations on other variabilities.
Yes. But if they are invariable, there probably will be sometimes grand fluctuations that will cause a strong invariability in a localized area.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what Fort's getting at, I think. And I love his, he's poking at astronomers.
Yeah. Deflating
That's
arrogance.
right. With an audible hissing sound. So then, the fields of ice in the sky, and that, though usually so far away as to be mere blurs, at times they come close enough to be seen in detail. For descriptions of what I call a blur, see Popular Science News, February 1884. Sky, in general, unusually clear, but near the sun, quote, a white, slightly curdled haze which was dazzlingly bright, unquote. We accept that sometimes fields of ice pass between the sun and earth, that many strata of ice or very thick fields of ice or superimposed fields would obscure the sun, that there have been occasions when the sun was eclipsed by fields of ice. Flammarion, The Atmosphere, page 394. A profound darkness came upon the city of Brussels on June 18th, 1839, and there then fell flat pieces of ice an inch long. An intense darkness in Minnesota, April 2nd, 1889. Sand and, quote, solid chunks of ice, unquote, reported to have fallen from Science in April. In Simmons Meteorological Magazine, why can't I say this? Meteorological. In Simmons Meteorological Magazine are outlined rough-edged but smooth surfaced pieces of ice that fell in Virginia, August 10th, 1897. So there you go. You were asking about what the surface was like. Mm-hmm. This one, it says they're rough-edged, but very smooth on the surface. Not much data, but a little bit more.
So that would kind of point to something that ablated and then fractured once it hit the surface.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Something that broke recently, but,
Either that or was rounded like a hailstone, but big enough to really crack into pieces when it...
Yeah, well, I think he's talking about a flat sheet that shattered.
Right.
Yeah. And so he's combining this with there's been plenty of reports and photographs of these weird blurs that cross the sun or other objects in the sky. And he's wondering, are these fields of ice that are just up in the air? Sometimes they fall down. Most of the time they're so far away that they're just blurs.
I feel a little bit Chicken Little right there.
I can sort of make up a scenario where you would have some kind of inversion layer, some major discrepancy between pressure and temperature, or wind turbulence, whatever, jet stream, and
polar vortex.
So you have polar vortex, something crazy. Let's just take one crazy thing for granted, but then you have all this moisture, and these extreme differences in temperature. So you have almost like a sheet forming, basically freezing as a sheet. But then, if it's really thin, could it be held up by the turbulence underneath or whatever? Or
that's a good idea.
Like a sail,
right?
Basically becoming a sail, and then it's still collecting more and more moisture from the top, and it's getting thicker.
Yeah.
And then, at some point,
even just your very thin sheet could create the blurs.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So you got this sheet, and then at some point, it gets too heavy, and it cracks.
Yeah.
Fractures somewhere, and then that just causes the whole thing to just fall. Yeah, the sail just comes apart, and then it starts falling down.
So, I mean, you do have, if you see a sun halo or a moon halo on cold nights or days.
Yes.
That's because you have a sheet of ice up there, basically.
Made of tiny particles.
So what if that eventually, if it's cold enough or you got the right conditions, that conglomerates and then starts to build up.
Yep.
But if the conditions are right, I could foresee it being, it's really pretty thick up there, relatively speaking.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the diffraction of the atmosphere anyways, and the brightness of the sun or the moon, we don't see the sheet as it actually is.
Yeah.
We see through the sheet.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Yep.
It's the firmament.
It is the firmament, guys.
Conditions are perfect.
Okay. Let's see. Yeah, they looked like roughly broken fragments of a smooth sheet of ice, as ever have roughly broken fragments of a smooth sheet of ice looked. About 2 inches across, 1 inch thick. In Cosmos, it is said that at Rouen in July of 1853 fell irregular shaped pieces of ice about the size of a hand, described as looking as if all had been broken from one enormous block. That, I think, was an aerial iceberg. In the awful density or almost absolute stupidity of the 19th century, it never occurred to anybody to look for traces of polar bears or of seals upon these fragments. Monthly Weather Review, July 1894. From the Weather Bureau of Portland, Oregon, a tornado of June 3rd was reported, and fragments of ice fell from the sky. They averaged 3 to 4 inches square and about an inch thick. In length and breadth, they had the smooth surfaces required by our acceptance and, according to the writer in the review, quote, gave the impression of a vast field of ice suspended in the atmosphere and suddenly broken into fragments about the size of the palm of the hand, unquote. This datum, profoundly of what we used to call the damned, or before we could no longer accept judgment or cut or dried condemnation by infants, turtles, and lambs, was copied, but without comment, into the Scientific American Journal, Volume 71.
Without comment.
Right.
So they had no explanation.
Right. That's right. But they copied it.
They couldn't deny it.
Yeah.
They accepted it.
Yeah.
But they had no explanation,
Yeah.
so there's just like no comment. We're not going to explain that we don't know how this is happening.
Right.
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 Instead of no comment, they could just say, we don't know what's going
this
on.
is we accept that this happened. We have
And
no idea how this
explanation.
happened.
Instead, no comment.
No comment.
No comment.
Of the
Can't
ice
get the wrong.
of the ice that fell, some of it enclosed living frogs in Iowa in June of 1882, it is said in the Monthly Weather Review. That there were pieces from 1 to 17 inches in circumference, the largest weighing 1 pound and 3/4, and that upon some of them were icicles, 1/2 inch in length. And we do emphasize that these objects were not hailstones. So now you have some that contain living frogs, and the pieces of ice have icicles hanging off them that fell from the sky.
Yeah.
So that does imply a sheet of ice that's hanging up there, and then it's able to develop icicles. And somehow it's got frogs in it.
And the frogs are hanging out on top.
And they're alive. In New York, June 11th, 1889, according to the Turin leader, there fell in a thunderstorm pieces of ice that, quote, resembled the fragments of icicles. Monthly Weather Review. On Florence Island in St. Lawrence River, August 8th, 1901. With ordinary hail, there fell pieces of ice that formed like icicles, the size and shape of lead pencils that had been cut into sections about 3/8 of an inch in length. So now we're going through a bunch of, now he's extended it to falls of this
gotten
stuff that have
weirder.
icicles on them.
It's gotten weirder.
Yeah.
That's so weird. It's the giant spaceship that's up there. It's got icicles hanging from it.
Right.
It's just been floating for a while, and then some huge storm comes and blows all the icicles off.
Right.
Or they take off.
Yeah.
They hear the
But
thunder.
where do the frogs come
They
from?
hear the,
Well, you got to have frogs in your gardens up there, That's where the earthworms come from,
Yeah.
too.
But Fort says, so our data of this Super Sargasso Sea in its Arctic region, and for weeks at a time, an ice field may hang motionless over a part of this Earth's surface. And the sun has some effect on it, but not much until late in the afternoon, I should say. Part of it has sagged, but it is held up by cohesion with the main mass, and whereupon we have such an occurrence as would have been a little uncanny to us once upon a time, or fall of water from a cloudless sky day after day in one small part of this Earth's surface late in the afternoon when the sun's rays had time for their effects.
Listen, man, we're talking about a game of chess. And I'm suggesting that maybe if the pawn gets to the other side of the board, you can replace it with the queen.
Yeah.
And you're like, but what is castling? I don't know. I'm not trying to explain castling right now.
Okay. Sorry. But if you did that pawn move and also the castling happened at the same time, I'd be questioning your use of the rules.
I'm only talking about the icicles falling
Yeah, sure. I got it.
part.
Just wanted to remind you that there were frogs.
Living this time.
Living.
Yes, it is in my acceptance that frogs do fall with icicles, but I'm only talking about the times when it's just icicles.
Okay. All right. Monthly weather review, October 1886. According to the Charlotte Chronicle, for 3 weeks there had been a fall of water from the sky in Charlotte, North Carolina, localized in one particular spot every afternoon around 3 o'clock. And that whenever the sky was cloudy or cloudless, the water or rain fell upon a small patch of land between two trees and nowhere else.
How far apart were those trees?
It doesn't say. The account by the Signal Service Observer at Charlotte published in the review follows, quote, "An unusual phenomenon was witnessed on the 21st. Having been informed that for some weeks prior to date, the rain had been falling daily after 3 p.m. on a particular spot near two trees, corner of 9th and D Streets, I visited the place and saw precipitation in the form of raindrops at 4:47 and 4:55 p.m., while the sun was shining brightly. On the 22nd, again, I visited the place, and from 4:05 to 4:25 p.m., a light shower of rain fell from a cloudless sky. Sometimes the precipitation falls over an area of half an acre, but it always appears to center on these two trees when the lightest occurs there only." So it did this for weeks,
That is crazy.
every day.
What are the modern accounts of this stuff happening?
That's what I've been wondering.
We've been wondering this too, yeah.
Like, we've got cell phones.
Can get up on that.
We've got cell phones everywhere.
Oh yeah,
I forgot.
I don't hear you.
I
You're
forgot
just
I'm
standing on your mute
standing on my mute button. We got cell phones everywhere.
Yeah.
Where's the modern documentation of stuff like this?
I don't know.
happen?
So that's the
Besides,
question.
occasionally you'll see like, oh, we had fish fall
Yeah.
from the sky here in
Yeah.
Australia or
Right.
something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
But where's the giant ice blocks or the
I have
sheets?
seen a
Or the-
video of a giant ice block falling in, but the problem with that is, I
Was it
think
in a
was
city?
I think it was in a city, but maybe I don't know if it was a high-rise buildings,
Oh yeah.
but it was like this huge ball of ice just smashes on the street.
Now people assume it fell from an airplane. You know.
Oh, yeah,
This is like
yeah.
in the 1800s.
Well, I've seen that before, Kyle. What you're talking about with the like maintenance guys trying to clear off ice from a building or something, and it
Yeah.
falls like 30 stories.
Yeah.
Crushes a car.
Yeah. Whoops.
Whoops.
Yeah, so it could have been hanging from the building. But I remember I was looking this up, and this was a while back, a long time ago. I was looking up, I don't know if I was looking up like meteor falls or hailstones or something like that. And then I just saw some videos of like these giant hailstones, I think it was. And in there were some videos of these just huge pieces of ice falling. You know, like bowling ball, watermelon sized pieces of ice.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, could have been, who knows, you know.
Kill a man pieces of ice.
Yeah. But I think that a lot of this stuff is just disregarded. But then a lot of it, I think, could be. I think it runs the gamut. You can have like true accounts that really happened and they're just unexplained. right? And then today they just won't make it into a journal.
Mm-hmm.
And so they end up on YouTube and people are like, it's fake, you know? Or,
Yeah. I talked to Randall about that. He did. Well, we mentioned it to him, and he said that the journals these days are curated such that accounts like this they just won't make it.
Right.
Yeah, and then some of them are fake,
Yeah.
right? So that's what I'm saying. It runs the gamut. Like we don't. Who knows? Like these are so
Well,
old.
and that's the case with that too. Who knows?
Yeah.
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 That's what I'm saying. These accounts are so old, they could be any number of those things. You just don't know what's what.
Yeah.
But the fact that they did appear in so many scientific journals.
That's the striking part of it.
Yeah.
All right. Chapter 14. We see conventionally. It is not only that we think and act and speak and dress alike because of our surrender to social attempt at entity, in which we are only supercellular. We see what it is proper that we should see. It is orthodox enough to say that a horse is not a horse to an infant, any more than is an orange to an orange to the unsophisticated. It's interesting to walk along a street sometimes and look at things and wonder what they'd look like if we hadn't been taught to see horses and trees and houses as horses and trees and houses. I think that to supersight, they are local stresses merging indistinguishably into one another in an all-inclusive nexus. I think that it would be credible enough to say that many times have Monstrator and Elvera and Azuria crossed telescopic fields of vision and were not even seen because it wouldn't be proper to see them. It wouldn't be respectable and it wouldn't be respectful. You guys getting this? Those planets are the ones that he's given names to. Monstrator is the place where the giants come from. Elvera is where the elves come from, and Azuria is the blue people. So he's saying, he's starting out saying, like, do we see stuff that we haven't been taught to see?
Yeah.
What would houses and trees and horses look like to us if we'd never been taught to have the concepts of houses and horses and trees?
Right. Well, that kind of ties along with the idea of like, what did the natives see when they saw boats?
Yeah, the ships.
Did they see the ships coming, or did they not recognize that as anything?
Yeah, that's right. The question that we can't very, very well evade, have these other worlds or superconstructions ever been seen by astronomers?
I would just point out that this is, that's one of the great things about children, that they
they'll see,
they see things as they really are in some cases, and then in other cases, like you're like, are you making that up? It's like, is it me that can't see what's really going on here, or are you? I don't know. It's a strange situation. They see things so clearly sometimes that it kind of takes you aback. You're like, wow.
Yeah. And he says that here too. It is orthodox enough to say that a horse is not a horse to an infant.
Right. Yeah.
An infant. What does an infant see when it sees a horse? It doesn't know what that is. Can it even distinguish it from the stuff around the horse?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's why he says, I think to supersight, in other words, sight that is not full of concepts that are built in, that houses and trees and horses, when you're looking around in a town, are local stresses that merge indistinguishably into one another. Mm-hmm. Okay, I think it's break time.
All right.
And we are going to get into some of the stuff that he says astronomers have seen, I think.
All right. We'll be right back, folks. Enjoy the break music. Called Prisoner Long Night. This is the Long Night
of recording this little thing right here that became the outro to Prisoner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a funky little bass line for you,
Yeah,
folks.
And finishing up here, last segment. Tears are flowing.
Got me
It's Friday night.
a double.
Friday night. Yoni's birthday.
That's right.
It's time for celebration.
This was a weird podcast week. Every day was a podcast day, but we
That's
didn't
right.
podcast until today.
They kept getting canceled.
That's right.
That's
Every
what I'm
day.
saying. This is a crazy time. Spring is always crazy.
Yeah.
And also, there are other things happening, like finishing the album and you going on a tour and
Yep.
doing all this. It's just been
Yeah.
lots of stuff going on.
All right, so let's dive into this last section here with Fort and some astronomical oddities.
Yes.
So Fort says, what I emphasize here is that our damned data are observations by astronomers of the highest standing, excommunicated by astronomers of similar standing, but backed up by the dominant spirit of their era, to which all minds had to equilibrate or be negligible, unheard, or submerged. It would seem sometimes in this book as if our revolts were against the dogmatisms and pontifications of single scientists of eminence. This is only a convenience, because it seems necessary to personify. If we look over philosophical transactions, or the publications of the Royal Astronomical Society, for instance, we see that Herschel, for instance, was as powerless as any boy stargazer to enforce acceptance of any observation of his that did not harmonize with the system of that which was growing up as independently of him as all other astronomers, as a phase in the development of an embryo compels all cells to take on appearances concordant with the design and the predetermined process and schedule of the whole. Visitors to Venus, from Evans and Ways of the Planets, page 140. In 1645, a body large enough to look like a satellite was seen near Venus. So he's using the term satellite in terms of a moon. 4 times in the first half of the 18th century, a similar observation was reported, and the last report occurred in 1767. A large body has been seen 7 times, according to Science Gossip, near Venus. At least one astronomer, Hozo, I think is how you say that, accepted these observations and named the world or planet or superconstruction Neith. 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 His views are mentioned in passing, but without endorsement in the transactions of the New York Academy. Azuria is pretty bad, but Azuria is no worse than Neith. Astrophysical Journal.
You think it's German? Because
Neith?
Ninth, because
Could be ninth.
I, like in German, if the I follows the E, it's the long I
Yeah,
sound.
it could be. I tried to look it up. I couldn't find any. It's just a made-up
Or maybe
word.
night,
Yeah.
but
Well, here it is. Let's see. Borrowing from the demotic form of ancient Egyptian. NT. Likely to originally have been NRT, or she is the terrifying one.
neat.
Yeah. Neat. Net, or Neat. It was an early ancient Egyptian deity. She was said to be the first and the prime creator who created the universe and all it contains.
Sounds like newt.
Yeah.
It also sounds like "niet," like Russian for no.
You're still standing on your mute button there,
It
buddy.
also sounds like "niet,"
Nit.
Russian for no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. So it is like newt or net or nit. They list a bunch of different ways to say it. Nit. We'll just go with that.
So yeah, back then, find something in the heavens, name it after an ancient creator god.
That's right. A luminous spot was, okay, let's see. The Nit was, where am I at? Okay, Astrophysical Journal. A light reflecting body or a bright spot near Mars was seen November 25th in 1894 by Professor Pickering and others at the Lowell Observatory. Above an unilluminated part of Mars, it was self-luminous, it would seem, thought to have been a cloud, but estimated to have been about 20 miles away from the planet. And there was a luminous spot seen moving across the disk of Mercury in 1799 by Harding and Schroeter.
Could these have been? Wow, just lost the word. Like the Northern Lights, aurora, electrical phenomena.
Could be. So that was in the monthly notices of the Royal Astronomical Society.
But they would have to have magnetism, right, to those planets.
Oh, you're thinking
Have a
they're auroras
magnetosphere?
from those planets?
Yeah.
Okay. Because somebody does.
Yeah, they're
mention it-
observing them like being close to the planet and
Yeah.
having its own luminescence.
Possible.
Well, couldn't you also just have luminescence from the solar wind striking whatever particles are coming off the planet,
I don't know.
creating
Yeah,
quote,
and the
unquote,
question is
friction
like if
there.
it's in the dark part of a planet, is it still above the planet far enough to be lit by the sun?
right?
If it's a
The
regular object,
astronomer would probably
figure that out.
I would
for
assume.
that.
Yeah. So if it's in the dark part of the planet and it's in the shadow of the planet and it's still luminous, then something is interesting there. So it could be an aurora, it could be electrical, or it could be a spaceship
Or do the auroras only happen,
at the poles.
but when they're facing the sun, right? So they would be at least partially luminous from the sunlight.
Well, no, the northern lights
they-
in the northern hemisphere happen in the winter. Am I getting this wrong? I don't really know. Yeah.
Don't know.
He lists a whole bunch of these. Basically, the strange things near other planets. I skipped a bunch of this stuff. According to the annual register, upon the 9th of August, 1762, M.D. Rostand in France was taking altitudes of the sun. He saw a vast spindle-shaped body, about 3 of the sun's digits in breadth and 9 in length, advancing slowly across the disk of the sun, or, quote, at no more than half the velocity with which the ordinary solar spots move, unquote. It did not dissipate until the 7th of September when it reached the sun's limb. I'm sorry, not dissipate, disappear. It did not disappear until the 7th of September when it reached the sun's limb. Because of the spindle-like form, I incline to think of a super zeppelin. But another observation, which seems to indicate that it was a world, is that though it was opaque and did eclipse the sun, it had around it a kind of nebulosity, or atmosphere. A penumbra would ordinarily be a datum of a sunspot, but there are observations that indicate that this object was at a considerable distance from the sun. It is...
How did he measure it? What's
What's a limb?
Well, before the limb, it was described as being 9 of...
the sun's digits in breadth.
Yeah,
What's a
what's a
sun
digit?
digit? Because I was thinking like,
thought the
okay,
same
the
thing.
sun is a digit, and so 9 in breadth would be
Watcher.
9 suns, which is a half of a degree of arc in the sky.
Yeah, I don't know.
So that would be
And this is a-
4.5
this is a-
degrees of arc.
I don't know. And this is a...
That would fully eclipse the sun.
Right. No, it wasn't. He watched it move across the disk of the
Yeah,
sun, so it
yeah.
didn't fully eclipse it.
So I don't know what.
Yeah,
a
I don't
sun
know what he
digit
means
is, but
by
the
digits.
watcher doesn't seem to be present at the moment.
Oh no!
Yeah, and it's 1762 is when this was taken. So
Yeah,
some people... anyway, we'll move...
I'll look it up.
Well,
Yeah.
were they? We knew of Mercury at that point,
Yeah, so...
so
What-
they knew it wasn't Mercury.
What?
moving
Yeah.
past the
So,
sun.
and what he's getting at here is that there was a time where some astronomers for a while thought there were planetary bodies inside the orbit of Mercury, maybe several of them.
Well, I mean, you could have chunks of something floating around in there that just eventually burn into the candle.
And we have since found exosystems that have lots of planets that are basically inside the orbit of Mercury. I mean, like they're close, so it's not uncommon to have really close bodies. Sometimes they're even got a gas giant so close to the star that it's blowing the gas off the planet.
I can't even find this sun digit.
Yeah, 3 of the sun's digits in breadth.
Okay. A digit, a unit. Digit or finger is an ancient and an obsolete non-SI unit of
Non-standard something.
Okay. Unit of measure of length. It was originally based on the breadth of a human finger. It was a fundamental unit of length in the ancient Egyptian, Mesopotamian, Hebrew, ancient Greek, and and Roman systems of measurement. Astronomy.
So it was 8 finger lengths by 3 finger lengths in size.
In astronomy, well, hold on now, because there's, I think, a more modern one. In astronomy, a digit is, or was until recently, 1/12 of the diameter of the sun or the moon. So it's 1/12 of a half of a degree of arc.
So it was
1/24 of a degree of arc.
well, but going back to his 3 digits by 8 digits,
9.
9 digits.
3 and 9.
That's like 2/3 of the sun by 1/4 of the sun in size.
Yeah.
That's a
That's a
pretty
large-
freaking big object.
Yeah,
in
and
the
it was
sky.
spindle shaped. So not a planet.
Yeah.
Uh,
Looks like Oumuamua came by a second time.
yeah. And it had a kind of nebulosity or atmosphere. It is recorded that another observer at Paris watching the sun at this time had not seen this object, but that M crossed at Seoul about 45 German leagues northward. What's a German
Well,
league?
that's real confusing.
Oh, we got the watcher back here.
So I just
What's
had
a German
thought, though.
league?
So what if it's a situation where it's not necessarily in like that close to the sun, but you're almost getting a projection of it. So it's basically in line with us, in between us and the sun, but it's closer to us, and because it's back then and we don't have advanced telescopes and all that, the projection of the shadow of it looks bigger than it actually is.
But it wouldn't make a shadow on the sun.
Okay, but hold on.
No, it's not making a shadow on the sun. It's the shadow of the sunlight casting onto us.
Hold on though, because we got some more info here.
Okay.
And also figure out what a German league is, because that's just how far away this person was from the original observer.
Gotcha.
So this person was 45 German leagues northward from M.D. Rastan. This person, M. Crossed, had seen this object and described the same spindle form, but disagreeing a little as to breadth. But then comes the important point. He and Mr. M. de Rastan did not see it upon the same part of the sun. This, then, is parallax. And compounded with invisibility at Paris is great parallax, or that in the course of a month in the summer of 1762, a large, opaque, spindle-shaped body traversed the disk of the sun, but at a great distance from the sun. The writer in the register says, in a word, we know of nothing to have recourse to in the heavens by which to explain this phenomenon. I suppose he was not a hopeless addict to explaining. Extraordinarily, we fear he must have been a man of loose habits in some other respects. Schwartz. So yeah, so they get parallax by the fact that in Paris, somebody doesn't see it. In this place, somebody else does. And in another place, they see it. Yeah, so they're like, okay, you can do a parallax and find out it's close to us. Yeah. And it basically looks like an artifact. It's not a world. That's cool.
A blob in his lens.
But there are two people that saw it and described the same shape.
Yeah.
Quit sneezing in your optics.
You're still standing on your
Okay, so
mute button.
I keep forgetting.
Take that thing away from him.
No,
it's get rid
I'm
of
still learning how to get the mute button thing going. You know, it takes some practice. You guys have episodes and episodes of mute button experience.
Okay, just don't stand on it.
Rookie mistake.
It's rookie mistakes.
All right, so the league was intended to represent roughly the distance a person could walk in an hour. And since the Middle Ages, many values have been specified in several countries.
Okay.
So I'm assuming the German league was how far Germans could walk in an hour.
Okay.
Sticking their legs straight out in front of them every step, as they do.
And probably Knowing them now much more efficiently than a lot of people.
Okay.
Probably a longer league.
Might be a bit longer, yes. Report by Pastorff that he had seen twice in 1836 and once in 1837 two round spots of unequal size moving across the sun, changing position relative to each other, and taking a different course, if not orbit, each time, and that in 1834 he had seen similar bodies pass 6 times across the disk of the sun, looking very much like Mercury in its transits. So I'm skipping a bunch of these. Okay, in the London Times, January 10th, 1860, is Benjamin Scott's account of his observation. In the summer of 1847, he had seen a body that had seemed to be the size of Venus crossing the sun. He says that hardly believing the evidence of his sense of sight, he had looked for someone whose hopes or ambitions would not make him so subject to illusion. He had told his little son, aged 5 years, to look through the telescope. The child had exclaimed that he had seen, quote, a little balloon, unquote, crossing the sun. Scott says that he had not had sufficient self-reliance to make public announcement of his remarkable observation at the time, but that in the evening of the same day, he had told Dr. Dick, of a fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society, who had cited other instances. In the Times, January 12, 1860, is published a letter from Richard Abbott, a fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society, that he remembered Mr. Scott's letter to him upon this observation at the time of the occurrence. I suppose, says Fort, that at the beginning of this chapter, one had the notion that by hard scratching through musty old records, we might rake up vague, more than doubtful data distortable into what's called evidence of unrecognized worlds or constructions of planetary size. But the high authenticity and the support and modernity of these, of the accursed that we are now considering, is something that we must accept. So by modernity, he's talking about the 1860s.
Yeah.
It's pretty modern.
Yeah.
In
So the watcher's
grand
saying
scheme of
it's
things.
4.5 to 9.6 kilometers. Hard to define, the German league.
Okay.
So, depends on how tall you are.
It's a rough unit of measure.
Yeah. So again, we're talking about possible planetary or large bodies that are seen transiting the sun that seem to be inside the orbit of Venus and Mercury. Some of them may be inside of Mercury, at least some other ones are. He thought this was Venus, but it was completely at the wrong time. And he knew that, this guy was like, he knew that this observation was not going to be taken seriously because it was so strange. He gets his son. He's like, can you look? Am I just being ridiculous? His son sees a little balloon. He calls it a little balloon crossing the sun. So he's like, okay, somebody else sees it. And then he writes a letter to a guy who's a fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society. And that guy's like, yeah, okay. And then he finds somebody else who had seen something similar, who was also a fellow. So these observations were being made. Some of this reminds me of the moon reports, the transient lunar phenomena.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The total eclipse of July 29th, 1878, and the reports by Professor Watson from Rawlins, Wyoming, and by Professor Swift from Denver, Colorado, that they had seen 2 shining objects at a considerable distance from the sun. It's quite in accord with our general expression. Not that there is an intra-mercurial planet, but that there are different bodies, many vast things near this earth sometimes, near the sun sometimes, orbitless worlds, which, because of scarcely any data of collisions, we think of as under navigable control, or dirigible superconstructions.
Dirigible?
Dirigible.
Dirigible?
Yeah. Professor Watson and Professor Swift published their observations of these objects. Dirigible?
Don't know.
We go on with these disregarded data, many of which, are of the highest degree of acceptability. It is the system, capital S system, that pulls back its variations, as this Earth is pulling back the Matterhorn. It is the system that nourishes and rewards and also freezes out life with the chill of disregard. We do note that before excommunication is pronounced, Orthodox journals do liberally enough record unassimilable observations. All things merge away into everything else. That is continuity. So the system merges away and evades us when we try to focus against it. So that's interesting.
It is an interesting concept that everything merges away into everything else. And I mean, it's like, I don't know. I'm trying to, every time he brings that up,
Where do you draw the line? That's what you keep asking.
it's a great concept. It's a great thing to like try to keep in mind. I'm having to, like, I need to like put that, like imprint that in my brain because it seems so obviously true, but then that's where the question comes, like, how do we observe the world?
Yeah.
How do we, we have to find some constants or some place to make dividing lines between things.
Yeah.
Right. In order to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when we've talked
how to say it.
Yeah. When we've talked about this before too, it's like, it seems like the idea is you must make those lines and draw those boxes and put things into categories. You just have to keep in mind that those are false demarcations.
That's what I mean. Yeah. That's what I mean. You got to have both.
Yeah.
You got to use both and know that the one that you use as a tool is not the real thing.
Yeah. That's right.
Not necessarily. It's an interesting way to look at the world.
Bodies that have looked like dark bodies and lights that may have been sunlight reflected from interplanetary objects or masses or constructions. Lights that have been seen upon or near the moon. In Philosophical Transactions is Herschel's report upon many luminous points which he saw upon or near the moon during an eclipse. Why they should be luminous, whereas the moon itself was dark, would get us into a lot of trouble, except that later we shall, or we shan't, except that many times have luminous objects been seen close to this earth at night. In 1783 and 1787, Herschel reported more lights on or near the moon, which he supposed were volcanic. So these are TLP.
Transient lunar phenomena.
Yeah. Bright spots seen on the moon, November 1821, from the Proceedings of the London Royal Society. For 4 other instances, see Loomis and his treatise on astronomy in page 174. A moving light is reported in the Philosophical Transactions. To the writer, it looked like a star passing over the moon, quote, which, upon the next moment's consideration, I knew to be impossible, unquote. It was a fixed, steady light upon the dark part of the moon. I suppose fixed applies to luster. In other words, it was steady in brightness. In the report of the British Association, there is an observation by Ronkin upon luminous points seen on the shaded part of the moon during an eclipse. They seemed to this observer like reflections of stars. That's not very reasonable, however. We have in the annual register in 1821 a light not referable to a star because it moved with the moon, and it was seen 3 nights in succession. It was reported by Captain Cater. See the Quarterly Journal of the Royal Institute and Philosophical Transactions. And there was a report from Cape Town Observatory, a whitish spot on the dark part of the moon's limb, and 3 smaller lights were seen alongside it. Yeah, all of these are transient lunar phenomena. London Times, December 17th, 1883. An extract from a letter by Hicks Pashaw that in Egypt, September 24th, 1883, he had seen through glasses an immense black spot upon the lower part of the sun. A sunspot, maybe. One night, an astronomer was looking up at the sky when something obscured a star for 3.5 seconds. A meteor had been seen nearby, but its train had been only momentarily visible. Dr. Wolf was the astronomer, and this was published in Nature, volume 86. The next datum is one of the most sensational we have, except that there is very little to it. A dark object that was seen by Professor Heiss for 11 degrees of arc moving slowly across the Milky Way. This was reported in the report of the British Association.
It's just freaky to think about. You're like looking through your telescope at tracking a star, and then suddenly it just blanks out.
Yeah. Yes.
3.5 seconds later, it's like, it comes back. You're like, what just passed between me and that star?
Right.
Looking out, and that's what makes me think about the dark forest right there.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Oh, and it had to be 3.5 seconds long.
Yeah.
Get your foot
Sorry, I keep forgetting. It had to be 3.5 seconds long of material going by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At whatever distance it was to block that off.
Yeah.
And this
At
last,
whatever speed it was going out there.
and this last one, Professor Heiss watched a dark object moving across the Milky Way for 11 degrees of arc.
Which is
He
huge.
tracked it, a black object
Yeah.
that was obscuring the Milky Way.
That's crazy.
In Knowledge, February 1894, are 2 photographs of Brooks's comet that are shown as evidence of its seeming collision with a dark object. In October of 1893, our own wording is that it struck against something. Professor Barnard's is that it had entered some dense medium which shattered it. For all I know, it had knocked merely against a field of ice. But yeah, that's an interesting too. They observed a comet out in space. And they're watching the comet, and it like hit something and broke.
That's cool.
And Fort's like, it ran into something dark. And but the professor's like, well, it entered some dense medium, which is like a weaselly way of saying a rock, yeah, or a spaceship.
A dense medium.
Upon the evening of January 27th, 1912, Dr. Harris saw, upon the moon, an intensely black object. He estimated it to be 250 miles long and 50 miles wide. The object resembled a crow poised as near as anything. Clouds then cut off the observation. Dr. Harris writes, I cannot but think that a very interesting and curious phenomena happened. That would be annoying. You see some crazy transient lunar phenomenon, and you're like, whoa, what is that? And you're watching it, and then a cloud's like, no. And of course, the cloud leaves, and it's gone,
A dense medium got between you and your
That's
thing you were looking at.
Chapter 15. A short chapter coming now, says Fort, and it's the worst of them all. I think it's speculative. It's a lapse from our usual pseudo standards. I think it must mean that the preceding chapter was very efficiently done. And that now, by the rhythm of all quasi things, which can't be real things if they're rhythms, because a rhythm is an appearance that turns into its own opposite and then back again. But now to pay up, we're what we weren't. Short chapter, and I think we'll fill in with several points in intermediatism. I am not convinced that we made a fetish of the preposterous. I think our feeling is that in first groupings, there's no knowing what will afterward be the acceptable. I think that if an early biologist heard of birds that grow on trees, he should record that he had heard of birds that grow on trees and then let sorting over data occur afterward. The one thing that we try to tone down, but that is to a great degree unavoidable, is having our data all mixed up like Long Island and Florida in the minds of early American explorers. My own notion is that this whole book is very much like a map of North America in which the Hudson River is set down as a passage leading to Siberia. We think of Monstrator and Melanchius and of a world that is now in communication with this earth, if so secretly, with certain esoteric ones upon this earth. Whether that world's Monstrator and Monstrator's Melanchius must be the subject of later inquiry. It would be a gross thing to do. Solve up everything now and leave nothing to our disciples. I have been very much struck with the phenomena of cup marks. They look to me like symbols of communication, but they do not look to me like means of communication between some of the inhabitants of this earth and other inhabitants of this earth. My own impression is that some external force has marked, with symbols, rocks of this earth from far away. I do not think that cup marks are inscribed communications among different inhabitants of this earth because it seems too unacceptable that inhabitants of China, Scotland, and America should have all conceived of the same system. So here again,
What's he talking about?
cup marks. They're little dots and cut like they're indents in rocks, but they're in patterns. You can find them in, there's a lot of them in England, Scotland, and stuff.
I feel
How
like
big are these
China.
things?
They're the size of little teacups, but they're like holes or an indent in the rock, and then they'll be
Okay.
and they resemble Morse code in some cases. It's like weird. They look like a kind of writing, but
In Utah, there were, like, in areas where you'd have these big flat faces of rock, where there were petroglyphs and stuff. In other areas, there were like all these.
little circles.
Yeah, and some people suggested, maybe I don't remember who suggested that they were like, made by bullets, like people shooting at the walls. But they were just round little
Yeah.
holes, and I originally
Divots.
I thought that they were like divots. I thought that they were maybe like star maps or constellations or something. So I had noticed them on these rock faces, both with and without petroglyphs on them. But some of them were like tight groupings. What are you thinking?
So, at Lewis Canyon along the Pecos, where there's that giant slab of rock that they've just carved for hundreds, thousands of years, there's like multiple pathways of those dots that have been some that are like 4 dots wide.
Wow.
Just like pathways
Wow.
that they've carved into the top of it.
Huh?
But it's the same thing, like those divots.
Yeah, they're divots. Yeah,
They're small, like
Quarter
size of a
size,
quarter
yeah.
or a $50, but they're uniform. And they've done like single lines, double dot lines, all the way up to
saw
like
lots of 'em in
multi-dot
Utah.
lines.
in Moab.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same thing, yeah.
Okay.
Well, these are larger. They call them cups because they're like the size of a.
So
little
more like
teacup.
a mortar pestle.
Yeah, but they're like you're saying they're in large arrays, and there'll be lines of them, and
All right. Well, they're totally different. To be a good intermediatist, like these are completely different things.
Yeah. Never mind, folks.
I don't know if they're different. He's pointing out that they're across the world, and I think that and he wants to say, well, this means that because he kind of accepts the standard model of archaeology, at least the way he writes in the book.
And back then in the 1800s,
Yeah, that
or was
they're-
it early 1900s?
Yeah, well, the book was published 1920. So he's kind of accepting the idea that of the isolationist thing.
Yeah.
So there can't be a common set of communication styles across large areas of the planet. Like,
Well, but at the same time, a dot is a dot is a dot, no matter
Mm-hmm.
what size it is.
yeah. Yeah, but they appear in patterns that resemble, in some cases, Morse code. People have tried to decode them in various ways, so it's just, it is interesting. But yeah, you could imagine that people could come up with ways to communicate with dots.
Yeah.
But we're out of time.
Yep.
The sands of time have run out.
They have. That's right.
And it's 1 a.m.
Ooh.
And I would like to thank some people before you get to the ending credits there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, these are the ending credits. This is the beginning of the ending credits.
The most important part of the ending credits.
That's right. I would like to thank executive producer of this show, the 236th episode of Brothers of the Serpent podcast, Jeffrey Saucerman.
That's right. Saucy Jeff.
That's right.
Saucy Jefferman.
And
The Saucy Jeffer, man.
I will say, Jeff donated $80, but we're giving him an executive producership because he's done so much for the show.
He's donated a lot of time and talent.
That's right, time and talent, and he's also responsible for some of the merch
That's right.
that's showed up on the old merch.
He
site.
gets paid for those, though.
Yeah, I know. But we also do
That's
get
right.
paid for those.
We do also get paid for those.
Yeah, so Jeff says, "Hey guys, thanks for everything. I just wanted to give you a birthday NA donation, 328 from Jeff of Books, tyrant of the Discord, lover of books and boobs." Oh, it was 8008. That's what it was.
Of course. 8008.
Oh, back in the old pager days. Send somebody boobs. All right.
Pager and calculator day.
This is interesting. This is an NA donation day because our associate executive producer of this show is Judy Schwartz.
Hey.
She says, "Enjoying y'all's infectious laughs. Thank you." Well, thank you, Judy, and thank you for your courage.
That's right. Thank you for your courage.
That's awesome. $50, by the way,
Old
from
Saucy
Judy.
Jeff and Judy.
Take you down to Pleasanton. Show you how to make a Swift 50.
Oh, I gotta get a Swift 50. All right, you guys can get a hold of us, brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. You can send an email there. I do read them all. I can't read them all on the show, but I do read them all. And if you send one, I might read it on the show. You never know. Website, brothersoftheserpent.com. Check that out for all the podcast-related stuff, including the encyclopedia and the glossary. The snake skins, which we were just talking about. Jeff has made lots of merch for the podcast. So you can find his stuff at our merchandise store through TeePublic. We also have a place that makes hats, beautiful embroidered hats. I'm wearing one right now. I need to get a new one because this one's kind of destroyed from Egypt.
Yep.
It's got some pyramid dust on it. Join the pyramid scheme. Send us straight to pyramids. Donate to the show. Help us get new equipment. Go to cool places. Talk about cool stuff. You can do that through Patreon or PayPal. Thanks so much to all of you who have done that. So many of you have donated to the show, and it really helps us out. It really, really does. We really appreciate it. Did you want to mention the thing you're planning?
Oh,
Talk
yeah.
about this.
Oh, definitely. All right. So I just put a deposit down for all but one of the cabins in a campsite in Campwood, Texas.
Campwood.
GMA,
It's on the
Nueces River. GMA and Ty have been kind of working out the planning for this thing, and
Oh man, it's gonna be a huge disaster.
yeah, so we can fit up to like 40 people.
I've been guiding them.
Okay, all right. Sorry, guys. Go ahead, guys.
Yeah, we can fit up to like 40 people there. It will be 40 people. That includes camping. There's going to be there's camping available, but not a whole lot. So we're basically going to be kind of getting this all figured out, and we just reserved all the cabins. So we will eventually be opening this up to like, all right, if you're going to go, if you want a bed, you're going to pay this much, whatever. And it's just to cover the expenses of the cabins. We're going to figure it all out. We're having to basically put the deposit on because weekends and dates are getting booked.
Yeah, they're just very fast.
And there's a small window of time where the river's going to be up and it'll be good kayaking. So the idea is to do some kayaking adventures there. We can rent kayaks there. There's some outfitters. People can take us upriver, and then we can kayak down to where we're staying in the cabins. There's also the possibility of a nearby private property that we can go and explore, do some hiking, hike to the top of a mountain or something out here in the hill country. And then, of course, 45 minutes away is Lost Maples. So...
Yeah.
If we don't get any rain and the river's down, they have a spring-fed. They're right on the river where there's a spring-fed swimming hole. It never dries up, so we'll definitely have that. Yeah, we'll be hanging out. We'll be jamming.
We're gonna be jamming.
We'll be drinking some beers.
Checking out some
I asked
cool
him about the noise
geology.
ordinance.
We
I was like, do we have to be quiet? And he was like, well, there's one other cabin that we didn't get. Somebody had it booked. And I was like, well, if that guy cancels, let me know.
Yeah.
So I'm going to book that cabin. So yeah, basically, there's at least going to be 10 of us, of our group here. So that leaves about 30 spots. So if you want to come and if you want to a room, one bed, or you want, if it's a couple or whatever, just let us know your situation, what you want to do. Send Russ an email that you're interested so we can kind of get an idea, and we'll figure out the details and let you know more next time.
Yeah, 13th through the 15th.
That's right. Of course.
Of May.
May 13th through the 15th. So it's 2 nights. So we show up Friday and we leave Sunday. And we got some leniency as well for checkout. So should be pretty cool.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And I'll try to set up something on the website because I'm worried that people are going to start sending me stuff and I'm going to get completely lost. So I'd rather Laura maybe handle the organizing. But anyway, we'll figure it out. I'll work it out, but I'll set up a section of the website that deals with this specifically, that gives you guys the details in writing and where to contact us to get more information.
Yeah. I probably should have mentioned it because we haven't figured anything out other than like secure the spots.
Right.
And we'll make it happen.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
So May 13th through the 15th, we're going to be hanging out.
So just to give you an idea, it's possibly, but just depending on the situation, between $40 and $100 a night.
Yeah.
Per person.
Yeah.
Something around there. I'm not sure because we gotta iron it all out and figure out what bedrooms and beds
And if you're camping.
yeah, all that stuff. So
Yeah.
it's gonna be a pretty easy thing to do. Plus, what you would pay for a kayak with an outfitter, $30 a day.
Yeah.
For the kayaks, something around that range. So that's kind of what we're looking at here.
All right.
And if you're flying in San Antonio, check out Southwest because they're pretty cheap sometimes.
That's right.
Okay. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Sorry this episode was late this week.
Well, we went a little long, so kind of made up for it.
Yeah.
Extra 30 minutes.
Yeah. Contact the complaints department.
Yeah.
We'll make sure to shred it immediately.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Call 830-688
Johnson
for all of your complaints.
Dox the heck out of him, bro.
All right, you guys.
We love you.
He'll love the prank calls.
Always will.
Get back to work.
Good night, Adamu.